a yearly report that on how the station was doing and all the points that the CPB regulations say they should be top at. And it was well received. And I hope, I don't know if they continued that report or not, but I made sure that we judged the website, the diversity of the board, all those kinds of things. So that's what I'm bringing to the table, I guess.
And we should also note that Dan has come up with it's I must admit the megabytes are pretty big on the needs assessment, but it's a pretty good needs assessment model, and perhaps we can do that today or another time. I think we're probably going to just simply have our hands full just going through the regs. And then we have, of course, Otis here, Otis Maclay. Otis has been the compliance officer for quite a while. And I understand that Dan also chaired the Community Advisory Board at KCET. I myself did that in New York for a few years. We were still getting money at that time from the CPB. And I should note that that was when we had an inspection. The Inspector General came into New York at that point in time, so I was there when that happened. That's a whole other kettle of fish that perhaps for another occasion to go through, because this is going to be a complicated process, but the best thing to do is to get it underway.
I have a question before you go. Would you
Yeah.
go to your audio? Can you get to your audio adjustment and set your mic to automatic? Because you are insanely loud, and I'm sure
All right, how's that better?
over. Well,
Is that better?
I would turn it down because it's.
All right. How's that better, Otis?
Oh, that's awesome.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, now I can't hear any of you guys.
Yeah, Otis, yours is
No, what do you mean? You shouldn't have affected your listening at all.
No, I have a mic into the computer. Okay, is that better, Otis?
Yeah, and they're two separate things. Yeah, it's
All
great.
right.
And you can't hear?
No, I have all in my ears sometimes. You know, all that noise in the Bronx. All right, let me put up the. So, welcome everybody. This is. Are you streaming now, Otis? Okay.
Yes.
Welcome. All right, welcome to the Pacifica Technology Task Force. Who's Pac-Man? What did you just say here? I went for you. Pac-Man has posed a something into the chat. I should also note that you all can get in the chat the actual regs. You can download that. So, and how we're going to do this is we're going to read through it, and anybody who has comments or questions, please chime in. Our purpose here is for all of us to understand what's going on here. We're going to alternate the reading of it. I will take one or two pages. Yes, Julie, what's up?
Yeah, I think if you posted the link to the regs at the beginning before people joined, they can't see that in the chat. They can only see the chat since they joined the call.
That's always
if you wouldn't mind reposting, just
Okay.
So everybody has it. Thanks.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Always one of the fun things with these computer gizmos. Let me go down here. So I'm going to repost the regs, and you can, of course, get them at the CPB website. They are the 2022 Radio General Provisions. Okay, so I put it back up there. I guess we'll have to periodically do that throughout the time we're doing it. So, these are the 2022 regs. Can everybody see them? Okay, cool. All right, and maybe I should put it on the other screen instead of blowing it up. I don't know which one's better to be seen.
This is fine.
Yeah.
This is fine.
Okay. So, so as you can see, what's the criterion? See, that's the problem I'm worried about. Okay. So, an eligible grantee is a licensee that operates one or more blah, blah, radio stations. We did not receive a CSG in fiscal year 2021, of course. And the issue of determining whether we'll be a qualified CSG recipient is another question. But obviously, the first eligibility criteria we meet. we're not a closed circuit or carrier current station. We're not stations that are operated and managed by students. We're not under the other categories of you see here in these four categories here. We're not a station licensed to political organizations, et cetera, et cetera. Let's see, I'm getting a problem here with this damn thing. Okay. And grantees, okay, so here's the issue with joint licensees. Joint licensees must individually meet the requirements set forth with. Lotus, do you have a comment on this? We are a joint licensee, are we not?
Yeah, we actually, we're Pacifica, but each station has to do its own stuff.
Okay.
And I don't know if that's called a joint licensee. If you try to follow the names that they use for things, you will go insane. It's really, there just has to be like one or two people who know what all that crazy stuff is.
All right, Dan, you want to make a
Because there's a
comment so far about
grantee and a
this?
grantor and da.
Dan, you have any comments about this so far?
The joint licensee, recently KCET merged with KOCE down in Orange County. And I'm thinking that that might also fall under this definition. And so I could check with them to see if they have a better handle on what that actually means.
Okay. All right, I'm going to go to page 4 now. Hold on, let me just see. Hopefully. Okay.
Could I, this is Franklin. Could I ask a quick question?
Hey, man, what's up?
I'm glad to be back. And let me just clarify, if one doesn't qualify and disqualifies, everyone is disqualified. Is that true?
What do you know about that?
If KPFA is disqualified because they didn't meet their CAB, their CAB requirements, would that disqualify the network and the other stations?
I don't think that's the case because KPFK lost its grant before the rest of the network did because we didn't meet the criteria for membership and financial support, and the other stations continued to receive it.
Well, if you look at number 2 up here, though, it says that
One at a time, guys. One at a time. Go on.
We're all separate stations, even though Pacific is there, but all this stuff is filed under the individual stations, which means certain things are going to be the same for all 5 stations, but they're all separate.
It's a good question, Franklin. And again, we're going to have to figure this out as we reapply to these guys. It's a good question. I don't know the answer to it, to be blunt.
All right. Thank you.
Now, I can maybe you want to. Here we have the second criterion. And Franklin, of course, I think the last time, I think Otis was here when we did this a couple of months ago. Licensees receiving multiple radio community service grants. So each grantee individually meets the requirements set forth in the general provision. So generally, they're looking at each of the. It's my understanding from the past that they generally evaluate each station separately.
They are 5 separate stations.
Right.
Everything about a station is separate for all 5 stations.
Right. And so what happened when I began to learn about this in the early 90s was when Pat Scott was doing it, they had different criteria that what she would do was they allowed her to add up all the Nielsen and Arbitron ratings of all the stations and even them out. And then, we'll get into the minority status station issue later, but some stations had lower audiences below their thresholds, others had higher, slightly higher. So they allowed her to do that. I don't think they allow that anymore. In fact, I'm pretty sure they don't. They will evaluate each station per its metro market. So my understanding, and again, we'll find out more about this as we actually interact with the CPB, is that they then take the Nielsen ratings of the metro markets that we're in, and that's what they use to evaluate each station individually. Is that your understanding, Otis, or Dan, or others?
Yeah, that's what they use.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody, and you know, I know that we have a lot of people on the call now. I can't see everybody now because right now I'm looking at this, but anybody else who has a comment on that, please chime in. All right. All right, good. Because I know we have a lot of verbose people here. Overlapping stations owned by the same licensee are deemed a single grantee and do not qualify for separate CSGs. Okay, that's an interesting question, how that relates to what I just said. Anybody have any comments on that?
We don't overlap. We're in 5 separate cities.
Okay. And
Actually, 4, because we have 2 stations in California. So, but the signal doesn't overlap. So I guess we still wouldn't fit under that criteria.
all right. And then I'm going to, when I get up to section 2, I'm going to turn it over to Dan, and then I'm going to also ask Otis at some point to read out loud. It's sort of like reading a Shakespearean play. So maintaining eligibility. Yeah, Mike.
I was going to say that I think overlapping stations might apply to KPFA and KPFB. They'll probably be considered one station.
We file as one. I don't think we don't file KPFB separate.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that we only filed 5. We only have 5 SASs and so forth.
I don't know. Franklin's from. Do you know anything about this, Franklin? From your experience with this, do you know anything about this up at KPFA?
I don't know about the licensing on how they. It sounds like Otis knows more that we're licensed as one.
Okay, cool. All right, so maintaining eligibility. Now here, of course, is where this is the big problem, el problema massive. Grantee is responsible for ensuring it is compliant with the general provisions at all times during the spending period and must promptly notify CPB of any non-compliance by email to Director Radio CSG, Community Service Grant Policy Administration okay, so CPB reserves the right to reduce or eliminate grantees' future or current community service grants if CPB determines grantee is not in compliance with the general provisions in the Community Service Grant Agreement and Certification of Eligibility. I have absolutely no doubt that this is going to be the big problem area for us, and if we get back into the program, I'll bet anybody a sizable amount of money that they're going to put us through an inspector general process pretty quick. So, does anybody else have any comments on this before we move on? All right, hearing none, we move on. All right, CPB waiver.
The main principle is you do what they say.
Exactly.
You
I mean
try
that.
to be nice to them. What we did before, they actually put it in the report that effectively we were thumbing our nose at the CPB.
Right. Yeah. Everybody
So
should
we
dig
try to
up
be
that.
really nice.
Sorry. Otis. Do you want to finish your comment? Okay. Yeah. Everybody should read that Inspector General letter. I'll dig that up sometime. Maybe we'll go through that as part of our learning process. But anyway, and then the CPB waiver. CPB may, in its sole discretion, exceptional blah blah blah, waive a non-statutory eligibility criterion list. Okay. I have no idea what the hell that means, but we'll find that out soon. All right, so why don't you take over, Dan?
That means they could be nice to you. They could say, yeah,
Right.
well, we understand.
Right.
That's all that means. They have the right to do whatever they want to do.
All right, so that means we got to be real nice to them. We got to sweet talk them all the time. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Dan. Dan, Communications Act requirements.
Okay. The grantee may not receive a community service grant unless it complies with the applicable provisions of the Communications Act and its annual CSG agreement and certification of eligibility. Grantee must certify to the CPB that it is compliant and will remain so throughout the spending period. Certain requirements of the Act are summarized below. This summary does not include additional provisions of the Act or other applicable laws and regulations. More detailed guidance may be found in the CSG compliance booklet.
Go on, man.
Open meetings. Meetings of grantees governing body, its committees and CAB must be open to the public. In addition, CPB requires a grantee to give at least 7 days advance notice of meetings, including the time and place, by posting the notice on its station website, by broadcasting notice on air between 6 a.m. and 11 p.m. as shown by the station's log. Placing notice in the legal notices section of a local newspaper in general circulation in the primary coverage area, or giving notice through a recorded announcement accessible in the station's phone system. We okay so far?
Yeah, let me mute guys here. All right, Dan, unmute. I just had to, because I got all that extraneous sound in there. Okay. Yeah, and Otis, I think you should jump in here, Otis, because you're familiar with this, how you negotiated all this in the past with the CPB.
Well, I didn't negotiate. John Kriegler did when we really got hammered, and they stopped giving us grants effectively because of our behavior. John negotiated that it was the issues were the open meetings and the audits, obviously. So the open meetings we resolved with KPFTX, and every station has its has a bug on the page, the front page, that says what the meeting announcements are, and it shows the date that it was announced, so that the CPB could see that they were 7 days, and that was actually a big deal. That's basically what and then the other thing was we'd give them the audits, and of course that's where we failed. But that's basically what I remember, and they were theoretically happy with just us doing that. Of course, for us, it's crazy because we have so many meetings. So it's been working, and I continue to take screenshots every Monday, showing that it's there in case we ever have to submit proof that we did it.
Mike, you got a comment? Mike?
Yeah. Excuse me. Anywhere in those three things, I'm sorry, it's early for me, in those two things that you just listed, the notice of meetings and my brains are fried, whatever the second one was. But was there any mention in that last bit of correspondence with CPB about meeting the listenership minimums?
No, because I don't remember when that came in. When originally we didn't have that. That was added later. That was added under some Republican Congress that was trying to strip us out, because obviously that provision is exactly the opposite of what it should be. I mean, we shouldn't have to prove that we don't need your help because we've got so many listeners. But that was not part of it. And then the next thing that happened was KPFK slipped under the wire. They were the first station not to meet the requirement. And I can't remember when that was.
So one presumes that if we tried this again, we wouldn't slip under the, and here I guess I'm talking about KPFK, that we wouldn't slip under the radar, that it would be
under the radar.
Right away.
You're substantially under the radar. You're way down. So a KPFK would not qualify for CSG grants, but you apply anyway, and do all the stuff and become part of the system, even if there's something that disqualifies you from receiving the grants. I believe that, see, when we weren't getting the grants, we were still getting the benefits. We were getting the PRO payments. We were, getting all of the other things that you get by being a CPB member. That was still being handled until we ignored their request for us to pay back some grant that we had to refund them, and it's when we didn't do that they actually fired us.
Mike?
KPFK did lose its grant earlier than the rest of the foundation before the audit problems, because we were on 3 years of probation for not reaching the minimums required for either listenership or financial support for our metropolitan area, and failed to bring it up to the required level, so they kicked us off. I think the other thing Otis was referring to is that we overestimated our listener support, I think maybe across the foundation, by not sufficiently deducting the cost of the premiums we were offering people from the gross listener support. And so there was a penalty assessed for that to refund money that we'd gotten, which I think we eventually did pay back.
All right,
Well, we
thanks.
paid it back too late. In other words, we weren't nice to them. We were, we essentially said we don't have to. And that's the one thing that you don't do to the government, to the FCC or anybody.
All right, Dan, you got so many comments about this? You have any things you want to add to the open meeting, this issue of
What I'm looking at is back in the section E where it talks about a waiver. And has enough time passed, do you think, that we could go in and say, we really want to meet all the requirements, but we need to clean the slate and start it all over?
Well, I think that's effectively where we are, because since we were bounced, we now have to reapply as though we were starting from scratch. And, that's probably a blessing in disguise for the very reasons you said.
All right, well, let's continue. So go on, Dan, with the closed meetings. B.
Grantee must document why any meetings of its governing body, its committees and CAB were closed, and make available to the public a written statement of the reasons within a reasonable time after the closed meeting. CPB also requires that the written statement be made available for inspection either at the grantee's central office or on its station website within 10 days after each closed meeting. Makes sense. Open financial records. The Act requires stations to make available to the public their annual financial and audit reports and related financial information they're required to submit to CPB. CPB also requires that each grantee post the following documents on its station website: its most recent audited financial statement or unaudited financial statement for stations exempt from providing audited financial statements, and its most recent AFR or FSR, whichever is applicable.
All right, hold on a second. Anybody have any comments on that or questions about that? Anything they want to add to that? All right, because obviously, thank God, we're up to the AFRs. I mean, that took us a long time to get up to that, but I just wanted to see if there's any ambiguity or questions about that from it. Yeah, go on, Julie.
Yeah, not an actual question, but on the posting of the reason for the closed meetings, is there a way to, Otis, to kind of like automate whenever we have a closed meeting, a tickler reminder to the head of that committee to make sure that, or the chair or secretary, to make sure that, something gets posted within 10 days?
It's really up to the secretary, and they've been pretty good about it. And what happens is they send it to me, and I just put it up on the Pacifica page. You want an additional email to the secretary?
I don't really.
It is possible. It's actually an interesting thought. The question is, if you do that and they've already sent it, are you insulting their intelligence?
Yeah. No, I guess I was only asking in case there were some committees where we were behind on this.
Yeah, and honestly, I can't keep track of that.
The
committees really have to take some responsibility for their behavior. That the whole system is actually predicated on the concept that we're adults. I mean, I know it's.
Yeah, no, that's right. I wasn't suggesting that you should be tracking committees, Otis.
No, I know, but I'm just saying, it's actually been pretty good. Most of them have been, like Polina does it. And the only committees really that we see that with are generally the PNB and sometimes finance and sometimes the local LSP.
All right. And do you want to make any comments about this, Dan, these two things here, based on your experience?
No, because frankly, I don't have a lot of experience in this particular area.
Okay. And I'm noticing Pac-Man is posting all sorts of interesting things here, so you all should take it. When did Pac-Man? When did Pacifica last post its AFR? I believe we're up to date on the AFRs. Is that not correct?
No, we have the 990s and the what's the other one? But I don't think, and I guess we have the audit. But the AFR is a separate thing that's set up for the CPB, and I'm not sure what it contains, but it's slightly different.
Go on, Julie.
It's the two things we need to post are the 990s and the AFRs, and they are current at the website that Pac-Man posted. The reason the last one listed is for fiscal year 2020, which only ended in September 2021. So, no, did I say that
No,
right?
that's not right.
No, September 2020. The FY21 reports, yes, it's 22 now, but the FY21 reports aren't done yet because the deadline hasn't passed yet, or at least I don't think that the deadline is until June, at least for the AFR. I'm not sure about the 990 deadline. I don't have that off the top of my head.
They give
All
us
right.
6 months.
All right, I see that Pac-Man's continuing. Okay, so we'll refer to you later, Pac-Man. All right, so I guess we're up, Dan, to the Community Advisory Board, the CABs.
All right. All guarantees other than those owned by a state, a political or special purpose subdivision of a state or public agency must have a CAB. Grantee must undertake good faith efforts to ensure that its CAB meets at regular intervals. The CAB members regularly attend the meetings, and CAB reasonably represents the diverse needs and interests of the communities served by Grantee's station. The CAB's responsibilities include the right to review the station's programming goals, the right to review the service provided by the station, the right to review significant policy decisions rendered by the station, and an obligation to advise the station's governing body on whether the station's programming and other significant policies are meeting the specialized educational and cultural needs of the communities served by the station, and to make recommendations that the CAB deems appropriate to meet such needs.
All right, now that's a pretty heavy duty responsibility. Anybody want to make any comments about that? I'll go back to the page.
Franklin here.
Yeah, go on, man.
I don't think KPFA is up on their CAB requirements personally. I've been bringing it up. I brought it up mainly at the last, I believe it was an LSB meeting or a group of us meeting about the LSB meeting. And we're working on ourselves trying to bring the CAB back. I don't think it's been out that long, but they haven't been filing reports, and I don't think they've been meeting on a regular basis. And it's basically just because not just the COVID, but people kind of moved on and had to do other things, and the CAB kind of fell apart. And the main people that were holding it together, I believe Carol Wolfley and a small other group, kind of moved on to bigger and better things. Carol is on the local station board, so she's not on the CAB. And anyways, yeah, our CAB has fell apart. So we're working on reconstruction. So we would be somebody that would need the clean slate or the waiver if they would possibly grant that to us, knowing that we are rekindling our CAB and making plans. We haven't followed up on it lately in between meetings yet, but I believe it will be coming up at this next LSB meeting.
All right.
Yeah, so we're out on right now. We would need the forgiveness.
All right, and I'm just seeing that Pac-Man says the last AFR Pacifica submitted to the CPB is fiscal year 2011, and which station website even lists the CPB members. Bruce. Bruce. Okay, good point. Michael.
Yeah, just to report that KPFK is also in the process of trying to reconstitute a cab. Dan is involved with that, and a number of other people, and we've been meeting fairly regularly, but it's not officially a cab yet, I have to say. So I think our goal is to try to get a cab, an actual cab in existence by March, and then meet at least quarterly.
All right. Grace. Grace, you have your hand up? You have to unmute, Grace.
I know, sorry. I had a struggle to unmute.
Naughty girl.
Yeah, I think might be necessary. First of all, there are a lot of candidates, new candidates at all the stations who could be approached to populate cabs. I think it should be done as quickly as possible. The thing that the cab should do is hold meetings, make sure the meetings are properly noticed on the station website, on the air if possible. And also that when the meetings are held, minutes are taken and there's a roster and attendance log of everybody who attended. And then of course, anything else that happened in the cab meeting. That would probably go a long way to document the existence of the cab. This should be done immediately. And as I say, you've got a lot of somebody could be in charge. I think that in order to ensure management going along and helping with this, which is their responsibility, that a PNB resolution should be made instructing the executive director and all the general managers to ensure that there are functioning cabs at all 5 stations, and that this is going to definitely be one of the criteria in their performance evaluations. I think it's very, very needed. I mean, this is something like potentially $200,000 a year for each station that qualifies. That's a lot of money on an annual basis. So I think we need to put this on the front burner and do it through the PNB and through the LSBs as soon as possible. The other thing is, I think we should start applying for CPB grant funding immediately, as early as possible, get those forms filled out. Also, we might want to rethink applying for last year. And the reason for that is this. It's my understanding from a while back that late applications are accepted and you can still be granted funds even if the application is late, if there are funds left over. So the CPB sometimes does not use up all of their funding. And in that case, they may consider partial grants or some money. Of course, this is not necessarily going to be the case, but and we should absolutely this year apply for CPB funding as soon as possible, early, and then consider putting in a retroactive application for last year, just in case there are funds left.
Wow.
Oh, that's one other thing that I'd like to add. On the CPB website, there are extra grants that we are now eligible for as soon as we get into good standing with the CPB, that are extra, that really look like they're tailor-made for Pacifica. This is extra funding that we can apply for that's significant, and that I'll paraphrase what it says on the CPB website. I haven't seen it recently, but what they say basically is it's grant funding to facilitate networking of different radio stations, which is what we do. This is a no-brainer, and we can maybe get funding to improve our infrastructure to do that, et cetera, et cetera. So if any of you have the chance, look at the CPB website for that special funding that we're eligible for now, or maybe eligible for in the soon.
All
That's
right.
all.
All right, let me just read
Thank
what
you.
Michael. Let me read what Michael Heist writes. It's sort of entertaining for me to do. It's like a YouTube show. Do they ever actually give forgiveness, particularly if we find a way to present current activities as a clean state? And then Pac-Man, that isn't Kim, is it? But anyway, WPFW lists members from calendar 2020. Its last meeting mentioned, yeah, this whole everything we know. This is all screwed up, and that has to be corrected. And as Grace mentioned, this is something that should be an evaluation criteria for the individual station EDs. Absolutely. They need to make sure that there are things such as this. Yes, maybe you should write a motion about this as one aspect of this, Grace. All right, let me continue here. Is anybody, we're all finished with the cab issue right now?
No,
Go on. Who's that?
Ken.
Go on, Kenny.
A lot of this activity and documentation could easily be facilitated if it can all be done, if the cab activities could all be done over Zoom and then broadcast to a YouTube channel. Once it's broadcast to a YouTube channel, you have the facility of generating a transcript from the meeting. And you would have everything documented. You'd have your time, who attended, the participants, everything easily logged in. I'm not volunteering to do that, but if I don't know if that can be squeezed into the federal regulations for cabs, because they may say in person somewhere. But being that everything's gone digital in terms of like court testimonies and everything, maybe there's a change somewhere in the federal level. The other thing I would make just a recommendation is that the executive director at Pacifica at the top level appoint somebody, a volunteer or intern or something, to police all of this funding activity, including the cab, because it's silly to try to control 5 GMs or 5 cab leaders in all the stations and expect to get compliance from all of them. We're all aware of the different nature of the different stations. It needs central oversight and somebody checking in, a real person who's willing to confront the details and say who's on time with their reports and so forth, and bypass and assign and so forth. I'm not saying that, I know that we don't have it in a lot of money, but I mean, maybe we can find a volunteer to do that. The key thing is, can we move to electronics or digital universe and just do it all on Zoom and YouTube? It will obviously be a much greater service to the listening regions in the 5 areas to be on the internet than to try to have meetings in person where people have to come from 50 to 100 miles away sometimes to attend a meeting, and the rooms are limited and so forth. Going digital opens the door to real connectivity with the community.
Thank
That's
you,
it.
Kenny. I anoint Otis, and we'll give him another $50,000 a year. But anyway, yeah, you're right about that.
It is absolutely a full-time job, what you're describing. And part of that is because of our, let's just say, somewhat chaotic governance structure. There's a whole lot going on, but I don't think there's any reason not to do it on Zoom. I think it's a terrific idea. And I don't think the CPB would demand, you could have one a year. Right now, what is it? It requires 1 a year, 2 a year, I believe. It's a minimal requirement. And the CAB could be much more active and much more, community oriented, doing what Ken said.
All right, let me read out before we continue some of the comments here. Pac-Man, such radio grants are 10% of the total radio disbursement. Almost all is via the CSG program. Then Pac-Man answered or put in here something for Franklin about the non-CSG monies. We could talk about that greater later. Then Michael wrote, given COVID, one would hope that we would get a waiver for what just Kenny proposed. Julie just put in it might be COS grants. Let's see. Grace, can you post a link in the chat for the additional grants? I think that was taken care of. And Pac-Man, Grace and applying read a 21 May 21. Please an absurd suggestion. Not blah 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 blah. Well, all right. That's just again dealing. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Pac-Man. We just got to get this shit together. All right. Any comments from? Let's see. We have Beth here, King here, Sue here, Leslie here. People who have not talked at this point who want to add something. Any of y'all want to talk about this or have questions or comments? Going once, going twice. Okay, let's continue.
I'm sorry.
Go on.
King wanted to make a comment.
Go on. Who wants to make a comment? Beth?
King.
King, go on, King. And then I guess Beth wants to say. Go on, King. King, you want to say something about this?
Okay.
You may be muted.
King, you got to unmute, man.
You muted us on your end.
Oh.
I didn't.
He texted me. He wanted to say that, to his knowledge, WPFW does not have a cab. So we need to put some attention on that.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think we have anybody from PFW here.
Yes, we do.
Julie.
Oh,
I
Julie.
am, but I honestly don't know the answer to the
All right,
cab
all right,
question.
okay.
We have had one. I just don't know if we have one at the moment.
All right. And Leslie, you have any comments about this? Want to make any comments, Leslie? No. Sue? Did Beth go, by the way?
I'm
No,
here.
she's still there.
Oh, Beth, you got anything you want to add to this?
I would just like to request that the chat be saved and sent to everyone for the benefit of those of us who are connected by telephone, only by telephone. Thank you.
Okay.
This is Michael Novick. I did have a question or a comment. I want to follow up on something.
Go on, Mike.
Yeah, something Bruce mentioned earlier about the community needs assessment, because I don't see in these definitions of the CAB's powers that, but in the bylaws it does specifically say in the powers and duties of the LSB that the LSB is supposed to conduct a community needs assessment or see to the creation of a community advisory committee, it calls it, to do one. So I'm wondering about that, because I do think that would be an important responsibility for a CAB, is to actually do a community's assessment on, to serve as the basis for this review of the programming goals and so on.
Right. And as you see here, that's obviously under this D function here in the statute, the obligation to advise the station's governing body. I must admit that the last time when I had to deal with the IG, he basically said, you guys have things in your bylaws that we don't even put in the bylaws. We don't even put in the statutes.
Right.
And so I remember he was breaking our chops, like, you don't do this, you don't do that. So, and someone referred earlier to that 2008 KPFA community needs assessment, which I consider basically was not particularly a good example of it, because it essentially reinforced one particular faction's point of view about what the programming was. So that's another question to throw in the mix. But anyway, Grace, you got a comment?
Yes. I found the section of the CPB that talks about the grant that I was mentioning, and I'd like to read it because it's perfect for Pacifica. It's
Do you want me to share? Okay, do you want me to share? Okay, go on.
I'll share it. I'll share a link to it as soon as I finish
Go on.
reading. Collaborative Operations and Services Grant Program. The Collaborative Operations and Services Grant Program is intended to support multi-station initiatives to fully develop and implement collaborations, strategic alliances, and other forms of partnerships that will increase stations' abilities and capacities to achieve more together than each can accomplish alone. The COS will provide smaller grants to assist stations with facilitation, analysis, and research required for establishing parameters for collaborative efforts, as well as larger grants for the implementation of serious collaborative efforts. Deadline, rolling or multiple. Eligibility, TV, joint or radio CSG recipients in good standing, collaborations of CSG recipients, and or existing nonprofit organizations that deliver services to or represent CSG recipients. So I think that this this has our name right on it, basically, because this is what we do. And I think we just have to get in good standing with the CPB, and then we can apply for this extra grant and other grants that they have offered on their website. I will post this in the chat, the link to this in the chat.
All right, and also I should say in the chat is Pac-Man posted PNB in late 2021 said KPFA and PFW are the best place to receive CPB money. We already know that. But WPFW has no public record or a functioning CPB.
That means
Cabinet,
cab.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
As shown by their link. And then also remember the audience data, and that's interesting. The audience data for the May 2022 radio CSG application are already extant, the average of April to June. And then Michael says this could directly apply to COVID, race, and democracy. Yeah, that the Nielsen ratings is how they evaluate. Anyway, Julie, you had your hand up before we move on.
No, I just that the link that I posted is the same thing that Grace just was talking about. So
Okay.
we got that.
Okay, Kenny and and Grace, you got your hand still up?
No.
Okay,
sorry.
just put him down, please. Thank you. All right. All right, Dan, you got any comments on the colloquy you've been hearing?
I think that we're all a lot closer to having cabs than I realize. I guess there's three that for sure don't have an active cab. That would be KPFA, KPFK, and WPFW. The other ones in compliance on that?
KPFT, I'm not certain about. Does anybody have any idea about KPFT's cab?
Yeah, there's a cab. It's. I think it's been pretty much going on.
All right.
But they definitely have one now. And in fact, the person who kept the cab alive for years is Marianne Martinez, who's on the board now.
Okay. Mike, you were about to say something? Okay. I know at BI we have one. We just have to reinforce. Everybody has to help them out, help the cabs out. I mean, I think it's incumbent on the LSB members and PNB members to really help their local cabs out, make sure they're getting up to snuff. All right, let's move on. Okay, so now we have this. Go on, Dan. Keep going, man.
Okay, employment statistical report. Each grantee must file annually with the CPB its employment statistical report and make its employment statistical report available for public inspection at its central office and each other location where there are 6 or more employees. Interesting. Donor information. The grantee is barred from renting contributor names, donor names, or other personally identifiable information, collectively personal information, to or from or exchanging personal information with any federal, state, or local candidate, political party, or political committee. Grantee is also barred, unless required by law, from disclosing a contributor or donor's personal information to any non-affiliated third party, unless the station clearly and conspicuously notifies contributors or donors that the station may release its personal information to non-affiliated third parties, or advises the contributors or donors before any disclosure that they have the option not to have their personal information disclosed, and explain to the contributor or donor how to exercise that non-disclosure option.
All right. Does anybody have any comments about that E and F? Okay, that's pretty self-explanatory. All right, let me go to this. Otis, do you want to do this part here, this record-keeping requirements? Do you want to do us hear your senatorial voice? Okay, fine.
Really.
I just wanted to point out that those non-disclosure requirements are and, not or. It's A, B, and C.
Right.
It's not.
Okay. Does anybody have any ambiguity about E and F? Okay. All right, I'm going to handle section 3. Grantee must comply with the record keeping requirements set forth below. Record keeping, certification, and audit requirements. The Communications Act mandates record keeping and auditing and provides CPB and its representatives access to all records concerning a community service grant. Grantee must maintain such records as the Corporation for Public Broadcasting may in its discretion require to facilitate an effective audit. Additional information related to record keeping is found in the Principles of Accounting. This is, I think, where we've fallen flat. Someone, Otis, maybe you can chime in, others can correct me. I know in New York, they raised hell with us over David Rothenberg's raising money with tickets. And they were, someone can correct me, I think there was some problem of an overpayment that occurred at that period of time that we owed money out. Is this, Otis, are you remembering what happened back then?
I really was never involved with the record keeping. You know, John L. Mellon might know. I am not sure. The other possibility, of course, is Melody. I don't know about that. And I'm also a terrible historian, as anybody who knows me can attest.
All right. Anybody else have a comment about that? Okay. Grantee must retain all community service grant records, including documentation sufficient to substantiate its community service agreement and certification of eligibility for no less than 3 years after the end of the spending period. However, CSG records must be maintained for no less than 10 years after commencement of any of the events below, when litigation or an audit begins before the expiration of the 3-year period, and when CPB requests otherwise in writing. And notwithstanding the general 3-year requirement, grantee must need to retain some documentation for longer periods of time to demonstrate its compliance with the general provisions. For example, if the calculation of indirect costs and other valuations reported as, I have no idea what that means, National Financial, whatever, NFFS, were documented in prior years, they should be retained to support. So in other words, we have to keep the paperwork. CPB reserves the right to disallow any expenditures grantee cannot support with appropriate documentation. I have no doubt that if we get back in the program, they're going to come over and look at us with a fine-tooth comb on things like this. Okay, C. CSG agreement and certification of eligibility. Grantee must annually submit its CSG agreement and certification of eligibility to the CPB. Compliance is subject to audit by CPB's Inspector General and others, and improper certification may result in loss of CSG eligibility and penalties under the Federal False Claims Act and the CSG non-compliance policy. I guess that's what they hit us with when they got money from us. Anybody want to add to that? Okay. I don't see any hands raised. Discrete accounting requirement. During the spending period, grantee must be compliant with the discrete accounting requirement. E. Expenditures and discrepancies. Grantee CSG expenditures must comply with the general provisions. Failure to comply or to provide appropriate documentation may result in CPB requiring grantee to repay to CPB a portion or all of CSG funds it received. Now, that's what we got hit with a couple of years ago. In the event of an improper expenditure or any discrepancies or inaccuracies in community service grant expenditures, whether reported by the grantee, discovered during an audit or otherwise, CPB may, in its discretion, reduce the grantee's community service grant. In the event of a community service grant reduction, CPB may decide whether to recover the overpayment immediately or by reducing the current or future CSG rewards. If CPB requires grantee to return all or part of the overpayment, the CPB will notify grantee in writing of the action it intends to take. Now, that, of course, is what we're subjected to. Now, here's this penalty for late filing, which we should keep in mind, because if we decide to get involved with them now, who knows? I mean, this would pertain to when they awarded money last year. I mean, again, that was what Grace was talking about. This is what they do if you late file. If grantee files any of the following beyond the required deadline, its next CSG will be subject to a penalty. The penalty is up to 1/365th of the next CSG for each day any of the following reports are late. The AFR FSR, okay, well, so we know we weren't doing that for a long time. Audited financial statements, if applicable, and annual SAS, whatever the hell that means. All right, any comments on this last section by anybody? Okay, no comments. Okay, go on, Dan.
Where are we? Operational requirements.
Yeah.
Guarantee must comply with the operational requirements below. FCC operating requirements. Grantee must comply with FCC requirements for the operation of a non-commercial educational radio station throughout the spending period. Failure to comply with FCC requirements and the terms of the station's broadcast license may, at CPB's discretion, result in the loss or return of its CSG. Operating power. Grantee must operate a broadcast station that has an ERP of 100 watts or greater in the case of an FM radio station, or an opening power of 250 watts or greater in the case of an AM radio station. However, AM stations operating at less than 250 watts, which doesn't include us, at certain times because of its license restrictions, will remain CSG qualified if the station meets all of the requirements in the general provisions, and the CPB determines in its sole discretion that issuance of a CSG would further CBP's statutory goals of universal service and provide service to unserved or underserved audiences. Broadcast schedule. Grantee's primary signal must have a broadcasting schedule of at least 18 consecutive hours per day, 7 days per week, or 52 weeks per year. However, shared time radio stations meet this criterion if they operate at the maximum level authorized by the FCC. The substantial majority of grantees' daily total programming hours broadcast on its primary channel and all multicast channels must be devoted to CPB qualified programming. Everybody okay so far?
Yeah, go on. Well, Mike, I know Mike has his hand up. We'll just wait till he finishes this.
Okay. A locally originated program service. Grantee must originate a local program service designed to serve its community's needs and interests. Facilities. Grantee must have sufficient professionally equipped on-air and production facilities to broadcast programming of high technical quality, including the capability for simultaneous local production and origination. In addition, grantee must provide sufficient office space suitable for station operations.
All right, let me just read some of the terms. Julie put in NFS, non-federal financial support. Then Pac-Man wrote NFFS, non-federal financial support, which caused Pacifica to lose its second installment of the fiscal year 2013 money. Julie put in SAS, station activity survey. And then Pac-Man put in stuff on the SAS thing. They're going back and forth, touche. SAS, the survey that the CPB uses to collect information on station operations to enable CPB to advocate the interests of public broadcasting, assist stations and other public broadcasting organizations with planning and evaluation to anticipate industry trends and calculate CSG payments. Okay, yeah, Mike. You got on mute, man.
Yeah, I had two things. One was a question regarding 4A. I'm wondering if anybody here knows whether KPFK's license has been renewed yet, and if not, is that an issue? And then point D, I think, is very crucial because there have been some discussions about trying to turn stations into repeater stations or not broadcasting locally originated programming, and that was a factor at BAI briefly when it was shut down and taken over, and has been raised about KPFK, and so I think that's a very significant requirement for D. But does anybody know about the FCC renewal for KPFK?
Otis, do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I think it's been renewed. John L. Miller would be the one who would know, but I believe it's been renewed. I think the only one hanging is maybe, I don't even know. And he tells me and I forget immediately.
Anybody else? Dan, you want to make a comment on any of this stuff from your experience?
My experience, KCT is a weird animal because they have all sorts of staff to make sure that all this stuff doesn't fall through the cracks. And I think that the problem here hasn't been a deliberate negligence, but somebody's not staying on top of this stuff that's required reporting.
Yeah,
It
interesting.
is a full-time job. Honestly, it's a full-time job. You're constantly having to deal with it and check it out. And the only alternative is for each station to have the same thing, but you still have to have somebody checking it all. There's a lot of stuff involved.
Well, Michael raises a very interesting point because this locally originated program service aspect of this. Grantee must originate a local program service designed to serve its community's needs and interests. Now, what the hell is that? I mean, how could you? I mean, there's lots of things you could interpret as doing that already in each signal area. But I must admit, I mean, are they talking about a news show? Are they talking about, I mean, because a lot of people claim to do that. But I'm just curious what thoughts other people have about that. Anybody?
I see it as is there anything that is broadcast to all 5 stations? Any type programming? Because I think this speaks to local stuff. When KCT left the PBS family and no longer had to report to the CPB, their focus quickly became more about Los Angeles, which makes total sense. But now they're back in the PBS system. So all of a sudden, a lot of the stuff that they have to carry is stuff that's broadcast across the PBS brand. And I don't know if you folks are just locally focused or if you've got things like that go across all 5 stations.
Interesting. Franklin, you got a comment, man. You got to mute, bro.
Yeah, I was just thinking, what does that mean? Yeah, we got some local stuff at KPFA. Since we're Berkeley, we got Berkeley Yesterday, I think it's called. Some of our shows cover, of course, like state bills. I do reporting from where I live in Antioch, which is in our signal area, about 30 miles kind of eastward. So, yeah, I think if you want to try to figure out, like, if we want to try to determine what it actually means, since it's kind of speculative on some points, but yeah, we have local programming, so I think we're good there at KPFA.
I might add that at the Neiman Center at Harvard, they have just devoted 5 sessions to this very problem or issue. They've been talking about what does it mean to have a local news service, not a program service. And also at the Tao Center at Columbia Journalism School, the same issue. I mean, there's a lot of attention to this issue nationally. Michael.
Yeah, I raised it mostly to point out the question of turning stations into repeater stations. There was that when BAIO shut down and they started broadcasting so-called Pacifica across America, which was nothing produced locally in New York. And then I think there's been a threat raised that because of KPFK's current financial difficulties, turning it into a repeater station for KPFA, I think that would immediately eliminate that station being considered for a grant because it would have no locally produced and locally focused programming. So that's what I was referring to. I think we all syndicate some shows. I mean, several of the shows that are produced at KPFK have been, picked up by other stations around the foundation and the affiliates and so on. But I think that not having any locally produced programming whatsoever would eliminate a station from consideration for a grant. That's what I was talking about. We pick up the KPFA news, but at one point we did have a cutaway for KPFK, and they now it's coming out of KPFA, but they do in the description of the program they describe it as including KPFK as well. So I don't think that's an issue, but if the entire programming grid were to be replaced by a signal from another station, I think that would eliminate that station as a potential grantee.
Interesting. And I'm just reading some of the chat here. Michael Heiss writes, if the KPFK license is expired, does that put us in jeopardy? Pac-Man cries, KPFA's expired the same day, but it is renewed to December 1st, 2029. Michael Heiss replies,
They're the same. They get renewed. The licenses get renewed by the area, and as far as I know, we're safe on all of our licenses. But the other thing also is that the FCC, the public service report, the report of your public service programming, they say that they want to see it local. It has to be local. So that local issue is more than just the CPB.
right. And also I should add that the local issue, I look at the NPR station in New York City, WNYC, they have a budget of $100 million a year. And of course we can't compare any of our stations with that. They also received easily probably $10 million over the past couple of years. That's where Radiolab was. That's where a lot of the innovation of podcasting was carried out by NPR. And they have 4 or 5 paid staff. All they do is handle New Jersey. All right. And when you look at the latest Arbitron data we got for BAI, we still have, I was showing it to Otis a few days ago, we still have a certain percentage of listenership in New Jersey, Long Island, Connecticut, and Westchester County going up into lower New York State. And we never really consciously think about how to orient programming or news to that audience. So that's something that could be handled. And finally, the facilities issue. Grantee must have sufficiently professionally equipped on-air and production facilities to broadcast programming. I remember in the 90s, BAI got money for renovating its studios from the CPB, separately from everything else. So that's another question to be explored. Yeah, someone had a comment?
PTSG grants, and they
Yeah.
disappeared.
Oh, they no longer are there, Otis? PTSG grants?
Yeah, they're not there. They're not there. That was killed years ago.
All right, Kenny, you got a comment. Got to unmute, babe.
There we go. I keep clicking it on and off. I just wanted to ask the members of this forum, does anybody have connectivity with other nonprofit radio stations in your area for their community advisory boards or their system of getting compliance on licenses and other federal or FCC requirements? Does anybody in this meeting have connectivity, even indirectly, your cousin or a friend who's on the cab of another station like WNYC or KPCC or so whatever's in Texas and San Francisco? Anybody here raise his hand? Anybody know anybody?
Well, we have Dan here. He's from a
Dan.
public TV station.
Yeah. Dan
That's a
McCrory,
good.
Casey.
Go on, Dan.
The requirements are pretty much the same. These are written pretty generically. So a lot of the things that would, regarding compliance, would be basically the same thing.
Oh no, I understand that. That's why I'm asking. If somebody else has already solved it and they say, this is how we do it. We send out this kind of a mailing. We do this. We have, and so forth and so on. It's usually a lot, take a lesson from China. It's usually a lot easier to copy something that works than to reinvent it yourself.
Right.
So, do we have anybody there? I mean, we had one member of our board who got trained in fundraising at KCRW and went over the fact that all of the fundraisers on the phone went through a week of training and how to pitch and how to go handle the software and so forth. So they had a very professional setup for fundraising. Not to say you have to mimic them exactly, but we could take an, if we do, does anybody have any connectivity to working operations in other stations?
It's a good question, Kenny. I used to go all the time to the WNYC cab meetings.
Right.
Okay, and the pandemic has completely screwed that up. So, yeah, but that's a great question. Somebody should note that. That's a really interesting question to pursue. All right, let me read the staffing requirements. Grantee must employ at least the number of staff for its respective cap categories. Someone can perhaps tell me what the hell that means. It's been a while since I looked at this stuff. As set forth in the following table, with the exception of sole service grantees, which have no minimum staffing requirements. Then we see these various categories. What does cap mean? I'm not looking at the front of this. And then positions funded by the
That's
CS.
that's your population. I can't remember the acronym, but that is what size your signal
Metro market is. Okay. Well, anyways, maybe somebody can download this and look at this as I'm doing this. Positions funded by the community service grant shall not be counted towards satisfying the required full-time employee or full-time FEE. We know that term. Professional minimum staffing requirements, the minimum staff. Okay, so this is when they want to know how many actually paid guys we have in relationship to our metro market. And it can be met with a combo of full-time and full-time equivalent employees, provided no fewer than 2 employees are full-time employees. So again, this is the relationship. You're right, Otis. This is the relationship to how they define the metro market we're in and how many full-time employees or FTEs are needed to meet that requirement. Custodial and clerical staff, students whose student status is a condition of employment, interns in persons enrolled in programs of formal on-the-job training shall not be counted towards satisfying the minimum staffing requirements, nor shall personnel teaching or fulfilling other academic duties in excess of the equivalent of one blah blah blah. Okay. Mass grantees. We're going to get to that in a minute. Mass grantees may count full-time employee staff towards the full-time employee, blah, blah. Okay. Anybody have any comments about that before I turn to Dan? No. All right. Go on, Dan. Let me go back.
Okay, minimum.
Section 6.
Yes, minimum NFFS. Grantees that do not meet the required minimum NFFS or their cap category for 3 consecutive years automatically lose their future CSG eligibility as explained below. Minimum NFFS. Grantee must meet the minimum NFFS in the table below for its cap category using its 2020 fiscal year AFR or FSR, whichever is applicable. Minimum direct FFS, at least 50% of the grantees minimum NFFS must be direct NFFS. So what's that mean?
Exactly. What the hell does that mean? Is that how much money we have to raise in relationship to the metro market? If I think the acronyms are defined at the end of these booklets.
Yeah, we already posted the NFFS is the non-federal financial support, right? So you have to take out the CPB money, right? You can't count that. And so this is basically listener donor stuff,
Yeah.
right? And
Listen, donors and underwriting for the stations that, for the NPR stations that get underwriting counted.
got it. Okay. And so then I found the cap is the coverage area population. And so there's 6 different categories. And I found the numbers, the population ranges associated with those. And so let me, so those dollar minimum amounts. Okay, so I think we're all big, right? So category 6 is above 3 million.
All right, all our stations are above 3 million.
Well, there you go. Category 5 is 1 million to 3 million, but yeah, I think you're right. So we probably have stations, that maybe are not quite raising that minimum NFFS.
Now, NFFS would be listener member donations, correct? Would that be a proper definition of that?
I think all listener member donations would count towards NFFS. What else might count towards that? Like if you get local grants, that aren't somehow federal dollars that are, like passed to somebody who then happens to turn it around and give it to you. None of our idle PPP stuff would count for this, right?
Mike.
Yeah, these were the minimums that caused the KPFK to lose its grant. We were not raising enough money in listener sponsorships. We did not have a large enough audience based on the size of our metropolitan area to qualify. So these are very, very important. They gave the CPB gave the station 3 years to try to raise it up to the levels that were required by these minimums, and we failed to do so. And we're both our audience and financial support is lower now than it was when we got disqualified. So that's critical. They do again. They did count. It's listener support and underwriting. So the NPR stations in our area are vastly wealthier than we are. Both KPCC and KCRW take underwriting and use it towards the non-federal financial support criteria. We don't do it. Therefore, it puts a lot of burden on either other grants, as Julie said, or basically the financial donations, and particularly for KPFK because we had very, very high premium costs to gather the funding we did. The difference between the premium costs and the listener support didn't allow us to meet the criteria.
All right. And I see Pac-Man has made some comments here. Does KPFT have a full-time employee? I guess that's under here. Because we're in the Cap 6 area. So do they have full-time employees? And the other comment here is CPB may require Pacifica in its May 2022 application to submit 3 years of data. Possibly. And anyway, Bruce, you got a comment? All right. Beth, King, or Leslie, do you have anything you'd like to add to this or any comments you want to add? Okay.
Not at the moment. Thanks.
All right, Sue, you got something to throw in the mix? Okay. All right, let's continue. And Dan, you have any comments on this?
Is there anybody at Pacifica whose sole job it is to go for grants?
I don't know, Julie, or I don't think so at this point. Julie or
Not yet.
You could even have a freelancer do it for a percentage or whatever. And that's what I'm in another nonprofit. And even though we're affiliated with AT&T, one of the things that we're doing is we see the writing on the wall that with fewer employees, there's going to be fewer members joining the organization. So we have to come up with other ways to raise funds. And so we're actually actively pursuing training on going for grants. And I think it's really going to help. And I think it would definitely help here.
All right, I see that Michael has written. Yeah, go on, Beth.
We don't at the moment, Pacifica doesn't at the moment have a designated grant writer on staff, but the new ED has a strong background in development, and I expect greater attention to this area in the future. We'll be tracking this at the National Development Task Force too. One of our potential revenue streams that we track on a regular basis is grants. There's significant grant money to be had from FEMA, for instance, comparable to the PPP money. And we didn't make it this year, but I have my eye on the coming fiscal year to try to rein that in. That would
Julie,
be for infrastructure.
All right, thank you, Beth. Julie, you have a comment? Your hands up. Your hands
Sorry,
up.
no.
Go on. You have a
No,
comment?
I took it down.
Okay. And then basically what's written here from Pac-Man, the threshold is breached. Even KPFT had fiscal year 2020 minus $600,000. Okay, so we have the problems of the money. Michael Heiss is experienced with grants quoted as one of the reasons why the new Pacifica ED was selected and hired. I believe that's a fact. Since we aren't eligible for the CSG for other reasons. Michael writes, we probably need to clean house and requalify before we could use that argument on air. That was a response to Mike's comment. Mike Heiss, okay, competence. Yeah, okay. Oh, let's keep moving here. I'll go to the next page. But this is obviously the big weak point here. What does RASS mean? Does anybody know what that category means? Julie, do you know what that means?
That's rural.
Oh, yeah.
Ah, so that's not really applicable to us. Okay.
No.
All right, so that's the issue right
It may,
there.
wait. It may be more, just because we, on this call, all identify as urban doesn't mean that our signal areas don't cover rural areas. My county here, I'm one county north of Los Angeles and well within the signal area. And we do between $1 billion and a couple $2 billion in agriculture every year. And that's a significant part of the economy. And so just because those of us who make it to the meetings, they do so in part because we're in that urban loop, doesn't mean that we don't have the potential for an urban audience within our signal area. Thank you.
All right. And Jim D, it's an approximate sign, not a loss. Okay, got it. Okay, so again, this is a big dilemma here. Okay, let me continue the next page. Okay. Go on, Dan.
First notice, if the grantee fails.
Oh, what happened? Page disappeared? Yeah.
There you go.
But-
All right. There we go. If the grantee fails to satisfy its minimum NFFS requirement based on grantee's 2020 fiscal year AFR or FSR, CPB will provide the grantee with written notice of the same. After receiving the first notice, grantee will continue to be eligible to participate in the fiscal year 2022 CSG program. Second notice, if after receiving a first notice, grantee fails to satisfy its minimum NFFS requirement based on grantee's 2021 fiscal year AFR or FSR, the CPB will notify the grantee in writing of its continued failure to comply. After receiving the second notice, grantee will continue to be eligible to participate in the fiscal year 2023 CSG program. Third notice, after receiving a second notice, the grantee fails to satisfy its minimum NFFS requirement based on their fiscal year AFR. The CPB will notify the grantee in writing of its continued failure to comply. After receiving the third notice, the grantee apparently is still eligible to participate in the fiscal year 2024 CSG program. Wonder why they changed it there. We're talking all along about 2023. All of a sudden they put 2024. Anybody know why that is? Nope. Okay. Ineligibility. Here we go. If after receiving first, second, and third notices, the grantee is unable to meet its minimum NFFS based on the grantee's 2023 fiscal year AFR or FSR, the grantee will automatically become ineligible to receive a CSG in fiscal year 2025 and will be removed from the CSG program. CPB will notify the grantee in writing of its ineligibility. However, if the grantee meets its minimum NFFS based on grantee's 2023 fiscal year AFR or FSR, the grantee will continue to be eligible to participate in the fiscal year 2025 CSG program. It's a little confusing. Recurring non-compliance. If a grantee, after receiving first, second, and third notices in consecutive years, is compliant when filing the required AFR or FSR for the fiscal year 2025 CSG, but unable in any of the subsequent 4 CPB fiscal years 2026 through 2029 to meet its required minimum NFFS for that period, the grantee may be given up to 3 additional years to become compliant. After considering the grantee's situation, the CPB will, in its sole discretion, determine whether the grantee will receive up to 3 additional fiscal years to become compliant. If the grantee is not compliant at the end of the selected period, the grantee will automatically be ineligible to receive a CSG. CPB will notify the grantee in writing of its ineligibility.
Okay, so that's what happened to us, of course. Michael, you want to amplify that because that's what happened to KPFK. I mean, that's the problem. They gave us a three strikes, you're out kind of thing.
Right. Exactly. I think it was on both grounds of the financial and the total number of listeners, the listenership in terms of the Arbitrons, whatever they called them at that time. I don't remember if it was Nielsen or Arbitron at that point, but we were below the minimums on both criteria, both financial support and the listenership, given the size of the potential audience.
All right, I'll handle this one. This is audience service criteria. I believe mass grantees is minority audience service. Is that correct? Someone can correct me. I'm pretty sure that's what it means. Anyway, mass grantees. In order to receive a community service grant, mass grantees must meet at a minimum 50% of at least one of the applicable index goals in the tables below.
I think it's probably metropolitan because if it's comparing mass and RASS was rural.
I'm not sure because this is where they give the 50% dispensation. Maybe somebody can check that as we're talking. Sole service grantees are not subject to indices in either table below. Well, we're not in that category. All of the grantees, excluding mass and sole service grantees, must meet either the news or non-listing index goals set forth in the table below and associated with grantees cap metro area. We're in the sixes, recall that. We're all our stations are in millions of people listening, so theoretically. News or non-news community financial support index goals set forth in the table below and associated with grantees cap. Grantees failing to satisfy the applicable audience service criterion when applying for a community service grant are subject to the restrictions and potential loss of CSG eligibility as detailed below. So these are calculations. And I've done them. And I'm pretty sure the mass grantees apply to what a minority audience thing is. But anyway. So that's the calculations they come up with. And one can study that and then do your own mathematics with your own data locally to determine where we fit in this. This is something that we all have to sort of go through before we even go up to them because they're just simply laugh us in our face. Because I remember I dealt with the CPB back in '94 when everybody was attacking the CPB in the House and the Senate. That's when the Republicans under Gingrich had control. And they had an office inside the CPB that subscribes to Nielsen, or at that point Arbitron. They knew everything about every station. I was able to get detailed hour-by-hour statistics of the overnights in New York at WBAI from them at that time. So they have that information in detail. So this is the calculations we need to make. I'm not going to stop and go through it right now. Perhaps another time we can go through it. But that's how they calculate whether you get money or do not get money. And then you can see they have the same kind of issue. This is why you have to keep up the audience all the time. Also one of the reasons why I monotonously raise that issue all the time. And it's the same thing. It's a three-strike or out rule. If you get a notice the first year and you don't do it, then they will diminish the amount of money you get. Then let's go to the next page. Then they, I have to sit there and move all these damn things across the screen. Again, the same thing as before. It's three strikes, you're out. ASC notices they give you one, they give you two. You have to meet the basic minimums there for their ideas of what the audience should be. And if you don't do it, they're going to pull the money away, which is what they did to us. That was part of it, what happened. Other parts where we obviously didn't keep up with the AFRs. Now, recovery of eligibility. Minority audience service station. Thank you, Michael. And then Pac-Man a CPB application. The PNB needs to adopt a policy applying for such money. If nothing else, yeah, okay. Minority audience service station. Our radio station that provides significant service to a minority group or groups through diverse programming that serves the needs and interests of minorities. Stations are deemed mass if they meet at least one of the criterion below. And, okay, we'll get to that because I think they do define that later. And recovery, now here, okay, so here's what we have to go through here. Make successful application to receive a community service grant. Meet the applicable ASC requirements. That's where we're going to have a problem. Is found by the CPB to be in compliance with the general provisions. Is not barred from participating in pursuant to a CPB management determination letter issued in response to an audit conducted by CPB's Inspector General. Otherwise, now that's what I questioned Donald when he raised that issue in the meeting a few days ago. I think the first meeting he raised that, and I questioned whether they've issued a letter to us that we are permanently barred. I've never seen a letter like that, so I just assumed that was posturing politically at this point. Now here you have the this whole question of ASC notice and compliance. This is where you get into all sorts of problems with how producers view their willingness to stay on the air with a couple hundred people listening to them, et cetera, et cetera. Compliance project expenditures. Expenditures that this is actually more complicated than the last time we went through this. Expenditures that qualify for compliance projects include but are not limited, and I don't even know what the hell they mean by a compliance project expenditure. Internal, external analyses of station operations, acquisition of... Okay. So, in other words, you're spending money to pay for arbitrons, or you're spending money to do research, or you're investing in new and local or national programming. Investments in new staff, provided the staff are not used to meet the minimum... Oh, in other words, you have to hire people beyond the... we're under 6... We're the category cap 6, and the minimum is 4. So this applies to new hires. Investments in increasing or improving development efforts. And that sort of raises, I guess, development directors in the past were hired under those kind of criterion. Again, I don't know, because we used to have a development director at BI. We had that position for many years. Grantee will be required to report to CBB in writing on the nature, scope, and implementation of the compliance projects undertaken within the time frame established by CPB. Okay, so that is sort of interesting. Any comments by anybody on this? Any questions or comments? All right, and remember, this is the big problem here. This is the real problem here. You do your calculations of your stations based on your Nielsen ratings, and you will see what happens. That's why I argue that KPFA and WPFW are probably the only stations that are at this point able to get money. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. All right, let me go on, Dan.
Diversity statement. The Communications Act requires the CPB to support diverse, non-commercial educational content for unserved or underserved audiences. The CPB's goal, therefore, is to support stations in providing a wide variety of educational, informational, and cultural content that addresses the following elements of diversity: gender, age, race, ethnicity, culture, religion, national origin, and economic status. It is appropriate that a grantee engage in practices designed to reflect such diversity of the populations it serves. In support of these objectives, grantee must comply with the following: an annual review, annually review and make any necessary revisions to the station's established diversity goal for its workforce, management, and boards, including community advisory boards and governing boards having governance responsibilities specific to or limited to broadcast stations. The diversity statement undertake the following to achieve the grantee's diversity goal. 1, annually review with the station's governing board or licensee official the diverse goal and any revisions thereto, and practices designed to fulfill the station's commitment to diversity and to meet the applicable FCC guidelines. Number 2, maintain on its website or make available at its central office a diversity statement, approximately 500 words, that reflects on the following points, reviewing and updating the same annually with station management. The elements of diversity that grantee finds important to its public media work, the extent to which grantee's staff and governance reflect such diversity, and the progress grantee has made to increase its diversity in the last 2 to 3 years. And grantees diversity plans for the coming year. Annual initiative. Undertake one of the following initiatives on an annual basis. Include individuals representing the diverse groups served by grantee, or internships or work study programs, which must be designed to provide meaningful professional level experience and further broadcasting's commitment to education. Include qualified diverse candidates in any slate of individuals considered for positions or elected governing boards that grantee controls. Provide diversity training for members of licensees governing body or board of directors. Participate in minority or other diversity job fairs, or provide diversity training for management and appropriate staff. Recruiting. Grantees are strongly encouraged to interview at least one qualified diversity candidate for each senior leadership position hire. The term senior leadership position includes chief executive officer, chief operating officer, chief financial officer, chief content officer, general manager, and other equivalent positions.
All right. Any comments on any of that? No? All right. The interesting thing here is provide diversity training for management and appropriate staff. Later, we're going to see the need to provide sexual harassment training for staff. All right. Transparency. Public inspection of documents and website posting to ensure.
Hey, Jim.
Yeah, go on.
I'd say something on the training thing
All right, go on, man.
because I put my hand up. Sorry. Yeah. Let me turn off my speakers. The KPFA locals, or excuse me, KPFA First Voice Apprenticeship Training Program makes it a point to be a training program for women and people of color, which helps us meet the requirements of the training. Because I remember our financial, our business manager, Maria, would always ask for us and like who was enrolled at the time, go through the whole race thing and all that. And so I think KPFA is up on this. We got a man who's a general manager, a person of color. We got diversity training. We had that racial bias thing a couple months ago, sexual harassment training as well.
Okay. Yeah, it was interesting. They also included interns in it too. But anyway, let me get it back. I know in the sexual harassment training, when we looked at this a few months ago, they included. Anybody else have any comments on this? Dan, you want to add something to this?
Let's see. Well, I know on boards, the boards are supposed to be diverse also, but if boards are done by elections, how can you make sure that the diversity is there?
Interesting question. Eldest, do you have any comments about this?
I think Michael stated it pretty accurately.
All right. All right, let me continue. All right, basically transparency here. Okay, so to ensure transparency and public confidence, the communicate. Okay, basically we have to I'm not going to go read all this. This is basically we have to post everything up there and let people know what's going on. And here's something that I wonder if we do at each station. Station senior executive management, the names, titles, and contact information, a list of the members of its governing body, a list of its cab members, the most recent financial records as required by Section 2C Communication Act requirements. Now that's interesting. I wonder if that's up on the websites of all the stations.
I actually built that.
You built that?
Just the way the same way the automatic post, meeting postings show up. There's a page in KPFTX for each station like that, and I happen to be working on it right now because there's a problem.
All right.
But yes, all that information is there, and a lot of it is automatic. Coming from the stuff that's in KPFTX, and then there's some other things like the station management that isn't, but the CAB, for instance, is, because the CAB is posted through KPFTX, so that stuff shows up, and the financial stuff is there too.
All right, and documents for central office or on website at a minimum, each grantee, they have to maintain diversity statements, section 8, blah, 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 and LCSR. What the hell is LCSR? Which is section 6 of the SAS. I have no idea what the hell that is. All right, anyway, we can find that. I know that I'm wondering how that differentiates itself from what you have to have available for the FCC inspections, which is a totally different set of documents, if I recall. All right, anyway. All right, Dan.
Training requirements, annual harassment and bias prevention training. To ensure that CPB supported public media stations train their personnel to recognize, avoid, and report workplace discrimination, including harassment and bias, CPB requires annual harassment and bias prevention training for all officers, employees, and interns of each station as a condition of grantees' CSG eligibility. The grantee may satisfy this requirement through either of the following training options. Number one, interactive online harassment and bias prevention training service available free of charge through the CPB that instructs your personnel individually on the following topics. What constitutes acceptable and unacceptable workplace behavior, how to recognize harassment and bias when it occurs, and how to report and respond to violations. Or number two, a comparable harassment and bias prevention training program of grantee's choice. The program will be considered comparable if it instructs grantees personnel individually, either in person or online, on the three topics above. B, annual CPB sponsored compliance training. Grantee must annually complete at least one CPB sponsored compliance training session, including live webinars and in-person training presented by CPB.
All right. Any comments by anybody on that? All right. And I noticed in the chat, let's see, Michael has posted KPFK breaches the 500,000 threshold. Pac-Man says Pacifica is currently excluded from the CPB radio CSG program as per the letter of May 22nd, 2020. Oh, this is the letter. Interesting. Okay, this is the letter they're referring to. PFW isn't eligible for CP money, not least due to the fact it lacks a functioning cab. The termination date of Pacifica for the CPB radio CSG program was May 31st, 2020. Let's see what else. SAS, again, Station Activity Survey. Okay, that's what that means. And I'm going to open up. This is a link here, so everybody should. Someone else might want to, take these links later. I'm just opening up this to see what the hell this is. Hopefully it didn't interrupt. This is this letter. Are you guys seeing this letter right now?
No.
Oh,
Okay. I will save this and put it down. Grace, go on. I'm gonna. This is this letter that was the one that I believe was referred to by Donald, and I'm gonna post it up when we get through this. Yeah, Grace, go on.
Oh, I just wanted to indicate that there was an online sexual harassment training, and sexual harassment is a term. Oh, you can hear me, can't you? Okay.
Excellent.
Sexual harassment is
WRIT.
Pardon me? Someone talking? Okay. Can you hear me? I think you should see. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, there was a company we were using for sexual harassment training. It was very simple and easy online sexual harassment training. California law states that all employees have to complete sexual harassment training once every 2 years. New hires have to complete it within 6 months of hire. And also the CPB is saying annual, and they have their own possible free of charge training setup. We need to look at that. But this other firm was charging us a very reasonable amount. I think it was $25 a person for the completed training, and they have more advanced training if we want to go for that for managers. But anyway, we should continually be in compliance with this, because this is our first line of defense if we are sued for any type of discrimination in hiring, firing, or whatever. Sexual harassment is a term that's used to cover a whole raft of things, including discrimination based on race, religion, et cetera, et cetera. It's not just sexual harassment. So that's all. I'll see if I can figure out the name of that company, but we really do need to get in compliance and have all of our staff and other key executives and board members complete sexual harassment training.
Right, and if I recall, when Bertold brought this up to me a few years ago, or a year ago, the question was, how do you deal with 200 people? And I personally felt that, if it's only $8 a shot, it's worth it to have all the unpaid staff go through it too. Because
absolutely, it's very inexpensive, and it's very easy for anybody to do. It only takes maybe 10 or 15 minutes. It's very easy, and it gives us a tremendous amount of compliance. If somebody sues us for sexual harassment and we are not in compliance with California law, we can't win a lawsuit, because we have not done our due diligence to train our staff and key volunteers in what the law is. If we are in compliance, then we're really protected to a great extent from sexual harassment lawsuits or any kind of discrimination lawsuit. So it's really, really important, and it's so inexpensive that it should be implemented as soon as possible and kept. We should keep in compliance with this.
Mike.
Is that me?
Yeah, that's you, man. Go on.
Yeah. So I just put in the chat links to CPB station resources and training on FSSR and a bunch of other stuff. It looks like they're just freely available publicly, pre-recorded web-based trainings, and then they have a sign-up, which I put in the link also, for a February 9th training on completing the FSR. That I think probably somebody should sign up for and take the training. It would be useful to have as much information about this as possible. It's not clear to me if you have to already be in the program to do it, but if you don't have to, I think we should definitely get somebody to do that training.
That's a great idea, and the more the merrier, frankly. Now, this Pac-Man said the letter that I downloaded, which I will show later, was this May 22nd, 2020 letter was not published by Pacifica. But the New Day Pacifica people found out about it. So I'll show it later. This is more bullshit. Okay. Anybody else want to? Your hand is still raised, Mike? No. Okay. Anybody else have a comment on anything on this? Dan, do you have a comment on this?
No, I don't. Thank you.
What about you, Otis? No?
No, I just, what Grace said is the most important thing.
Yeah,
It's,
and
you know,
Franklin, does KPFA, did they put all the unpaid staff through sexual harassment training and things like that?
I believe so. We had something like Grace mentioned, a video that we had to view, and then it gave us like a quiz at the end of each chapter. It was about, I don't know, it took a little while to do, and you couldn't go at a fast pace. If you were going too fast, it made you wait to fill out the answers. But it was pretty simple, self-explanatory, and I was just trying to look up the emails on when we did it. If this is annual, we're probably about due for another one.
Okay, Michael.
Yeah, thanks. Maybe I'm speaking the obvious, but at least in business, and I know a lot of people here are in business, this is stuff that has to be done, as Grace mentioned, and I had to both make sure that the people I was supervising took it, and it was made clear to me that I had to take it. Isn't this the job of the EDs, either the Pacifica ED or the local EDs, to make certain that all staff and volunteers take this? We shouldn't have to be monkeying around with this. This should be part of their job, for crying out loud, and part of their evaluation criteria. If you don't do the things that have to be done, you don't get to keep your job.
Well, yeah, I agree. The thing is, the local EDs are GMs, general managers, and this, I remember I've taken these kind of training, and I remember when we first got it. It was when we were still receiving money from the CPB, but I know that Bertold told me he just did one recently, which was required of management. But the issue of requiring it for everybody is a whole different concept. So I know that hasn't been done in New York. Anyway, and what's this? Michael's Pac-Man. Michael knows.
No, I'm sorry, Jim, but the other part that Grace said, which is important, I mean, it's just so easy to do, and
Right.
it's also a way to insulate ourselves, vaccinate ourselves against things in lawsuits. Some of these things, they're important, but they're laughable. And the last time I took one online, my wife was yelling at me, "Stop laughing at them," but you do it, and maybe you learn something, for goodness sakes.
Well, yeah, they're all common sense. When I took it, it was like, come on, this is, it's like, but it's all common sense. But, like, you never know, because what got me from looking at the cases in California being brought against us by these different people, they're citing the whistleblower statute in the state of California as their justification to launch these lawsuits against Pacifica. So somebody could use this as an excuse, saying, oh my God, like I got sexually harassed, and I'm making a complaint, and I'm acting as a whistleblower. You never know what could happen. All right. Anyway, anybody else have a comment on this before we go? Your hand's up again, Grace. You forgot to put it down. All right. I forgot to put it down.
About to put it down.
All right. Anyway.
I'll say something, Jim.
Yeah, go on. Who's that?
This is Dan.
Go on, Dan.
I think that this is a real test of our ability to remain austere in certain cases. And I think CPB, if they're offering this training for free, then we should do it for free, because we know it's going to meet all of their requirements for such a prevention training.
Right. This link that was put up about the FSR training, while we're doing this, could somebody just double check that we have to actually be in the system in order to get it or not? I'd be curious. And then we have this grant. I mean, I'll just read this myself. It's a no-brainer. Grant donor privacy. Grantor must comply with all applicable blah, blah, blah. And regarding Dan. Okay, that's a no-brainer. All right, go, Dan. The next one, section 12.
Permitted CSG expenditures, unrestricted and restricted. Pursuant to the Communications Act, the CSG funds distributed may be used at the discretion of the recipient for purposes related primarily to the production or acquisition of programming. CSGs are divided into unrestricted and restricted amounts, each subject to the different spending constraints set forth below. However, both the unrestricted and restricted CSG amounts must be used to support grantees' ability to expand the quality and scope of services it provides to the community it serves. A, unrestricted CSG. Unrestricted CSG expenditures must fall into one of 7 categories, which include salaries and benefits for personnel engaged in those activities as shown in Exhibit B, attached hereto and incorporated herein by reference. Grantee may not use any of the unrestricted CSG to cover salaries and benefits for full-time or full-time equivalent employees used to satisfy the grantee's staffing requirements. Section 5. Restricted CSG. Restricted CSG funds must be used as specified in section blah, blah, blah of the Communications Act, which provides that the funds are solely to be used for acquiring or producing programming that is to be distributed nationally and is designed to serve the needs of a national audience. Accordingly, for all categories, the restricted portion of the CSG must be spent on national program production and acquisition costs and be used exclusively for the acquisition, production, promotion, and or distribution of national programming of high quality, diversity, creativity, excellence, and innovation with strict adherence to objectivity and balance in all programs or series of programs of a controversial nature. 2, qualify as a national program for funding from CSG funds. A program must be placed in the national marketplace of public radio programming. In addition to the purposes described in the previous paragraph, the restricted portion may be used for the direct costs associated with placing a program produced with CSG funds into the national marketplace, such as the cost of purchasing satellite time or other direct distribution costs. Expenditures from the restricted portion of the CSG must fall into one of the following 4 categories. Number 1, production expenditures. Production expenditures include grantees' production of programs for national distribution and the payments grantee makes directly to independent producers to produce programs for national distribution. Number 2, program and content acquisition expenditures. Program and content acquisition expenditures include payment to public broadcasting entities that act as producers and or distributors for national programs. It also includes payments grantee makes to acquire programs from producers, commercially and excuse me, and nonprofit, including independent producers acting as their own distributors, provided the programming is CBP qualified programming. Sorry, my dogs are distributing.
They have a comment about the CPB. That's cool.
Okay, distribution expenditures. Distribution expenditures include distribution interconnection fees, uplink fees, satellite space costs, and supplies related to the national distribution of locally produced or acquired programming. It also includes broadcast, transmission, and technical costs. It does not include the cost of the equipment. Number 4, promotion expenditures. Promotion expenditures include the cost of promoting acquired national programs and nationally distributed programs, whether produced by grantee or by independent producers under contract to the grantee. Grantee must ensure that any program produced or acquired with a restricted portion of CSG funds must include appropriate underwriter credit for the CPB, identifying CPB's financial assistance whenever broadcast.
All right. Any comments on this? Any hands on this one? I know with the number A, we've gotten in trouble in the past. Because I know in New York we got in trouble in the 90s over this issue here. They were talking about money that was, they questioned, I think there was a salary hire that got questioned under this category. And then it's interesting, the restricted CSG, I guess when we were doing national programming, we were getting money. Yeah, Bruce, go on. Yeah, that's an interesting question. How they evaluate that. And then because this is all designed to create national programming, and I'd be very curious. I don't know what the paperwork is in the past, but I'm pretty sure the restricted CSGs were going to the national programming when we had it out of Washington. But anyway, I'm not sure. Anybody else have any questions on this stuff before we move on? Okay. Other restricted CSG expenditures. Entertainment. Okay, that's obvious. You don't use your funds to go take anybody out. State, local, feds. Okay. Influencing legislation. Okay, another no-brainer. Yeah, you just don't use it for publicity or propaganda. Okay, that's sort of amusing. That's a double-edged sword. CPB qualified programming. Grantees shall not use any CSG funds to cover the cost of producing, acquiring, or distributing programs unless they are CPB qualified programming. Interesting. That, I wonder what that will do to us if we... Okay, that's an interesting question, how that applies to us. Anyway, restricting CSG funds. Grantee may not impound or otherwise withhold or inappropriately restrict the station's use of CSG funds. CSG funds may not be used to supplant funds or reduce budgets for other support already being provided to the stations by grantee. Now, this is, of course, a gray area, because essentially, in reality, I know that the money was being sort of moved around to cover our costs. But anyway, that's another issue. Overhead expenses. Grantees shall not use CSG funds to offset a licensee's overhead for any... Okay, in other words, so you got to really strictly categorize all this money out, is what I'm seeing here. It's going to have to be carefully audited in different ways if we get it. And, we have to keep in mind all these different questions of how they restrict it. Sale of assets. Let's see. Oh, the damn control thing came down again. Well, I can't really see what that says. Because right now the Zoom stuff is blocking me. So you guys have read it, but I haven't. Oh, here we go. Grantees shall use CSG funds and proceeds from the sale of assets acquired solely for the benefit of... Okay, so you don't, use it only for the benefit of the public broadcast radio station. Staffing costs. Now here's something I know we wiggle around with this. Again, I know examples of that, which I will refrain in an open meeting to talk about. Full-time employees whose salaries are paid using CSG funds must exercise full-time responsibilities over the public broadcast station's operations. Grantees shall not require said personnel to perform duties unrelated to the public broadcasting radio stations. In other words, they got to work and do stuff for the station. They shall ensure that the portion of their salary paid with CSG funds shall not exceed the percentage of said employee's time spent on... Okay, that's the same thing. Grantees shall not use CSG funds for personal services, expenses, or the cost of technical facilities in excess of the standard amount grantee usually pays for the same under similar circumstances. I think that's what got New York busted, by the way. I think this is the problem with Rothenberg. Because I think this is when they they said you're selling a ticket that you normally would buy, and then you're, turning it into a premium. Which is where the Rothenberg... I'm pretty sure this is where the Rothenberg problem happened, but you all can look at that. That's easily available, that IG report. Okay, Danny.
Spending period. CSG funds must be expended during the spending period in accordance with the purposes and restrictions set forth in these general provisions in the financial reporting guidelines incorporated herein by reference. Any funds not expended during the spending period must be returned to CPB no later than November 3rd, 2023. Expenditures inconsistent with these shall be considered unauthorized expenditures and must be returned to CPB pursuant to Section 18, Return of Funds. Once the spending period expires, grantee may not reallocate disallowed expenditures.
All right, any comments on any of this? No. Okay. CSG payments and report due dates will be dispersed into installments. However, each CSG payment is contingent upon grantees' compliance with these general provisions, which we've been going over ad nauseum. and submitting all forms, reports, and other documents. So again, you're going to have to really be toilet trained to do all this stuff. And go back over this again and again and again, and get help from other people until we know how to. We don't have a problem with this. CSG offer expiration. Grantee's head of grantee and licensee official must execute its CSG blah 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 by June 30th, 2022, or risk forfeiting its CSG as determined by the CPB. Now, maybe somebody correct me. Is this the new due date to actually apply? I don't think so. I think it's sooner than that. I think it's April or May. Julie, you're nodding your head. What's your understanding?
Well, it was a date in May this past year, so I would assume it's similar, but obviously we should get our act together and have our application completed as soon as possible, especially since, and that's what I appreciate about today's effort is if there are things that are going to take us a little while, to get our act together on, well, then let's get going.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, this is getting it signed by them and completed, so the application deadline must be before that.
Yeah, we need to find out what that is. Anyway, that's another problem. Okay, reporting requirements. All requirements are due on time. Within 5 months. Okay, so I'm pretty sure, if I recall, that's why I asked the question. I was sort of curious to ask when the AFRs were being done. I guess they're close to being done. Is that correct, Julie, from your understanding?
Yeah. I mean, they're definitely working in earnest. I don't know how close, but they're cracking away.
All right. So, and then the SAS, that was again, what is that? The station audience? What does that acronym mean again? Station audience study?
Station activity survey.
And what the hell? And that's something they do, if I recall, right?
No, I think that's something that we do.
The station has to fill it out, and it's a big report.
Okay, so we have to get... Stuff. Oh, look at this. Now, this has to be done by the 15th of February? Oh. Ay. Interesting. All right. If grantee... Okay, so that's an interesting question. Obviously, I don't know if this is actually correct. I can't see us getting this done by the 15th of February. But anyway... If grantee submits any of these documents, they will, the financial penalty. So in other words, we might have to get our act together even quicker than we think, because this is when they knock you out by 1/365th a day, if I recall. So that has to be ascertained. What the hell does that mean? Does that mean we have to get our act together immediately and start doing this right away? AFR is separate and audit financial statements to CPB. Okay. However, if multiple stations are licensed or operated by the same entity, grantee may submit a consolidated financial statement. This submitting these FSR of less than 300,000 have the option of submitting an audit. Okay, so this is interesting, but I'm pretty sure we still have to. Go on, Julie.
Yeah. So part of this section, and maybe Pac-Man wants to react to this, but part of this section reads as if, what are your obligations if you have an FY21 CSG and we don't? So, obviously we don't have something that we can, accept the agreement and sign it and return it because we don't have an agreement, right? So the question is, we should absolutely positively be trying to do as many of these things as we can, but some of them may not really apply to us in this particular section 15. And maybe Pac-Man wants to weigh in the chat.
Yeah, I see CPB audit. Well, there's a whole bunch of stuff here. CPB audit Pacifica, September 21st, 2012. The audit was too complete. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. The CSG, the radio CSG deadline changes. Remember, it's first come, first served. Recent CSG deadlines. Yeah, this possibly what Pac-Man, you're saying it's May 18th, 2021. Oh, you're right. Okay, so Pac-Man, I hope I'm not wrong with the gender here. Yes, it's the deadline for current people involved. So May 18th. Anyway, we got to get our act together immediately. A radio, blah blah blah. Written up by 20th of April this year. Okay, so again, we have time, but we got to get our act together. And then those submitting FSR, blah blah. Those with total financial revenue of 300,000 or more must submit an audited financial statement. This is interesting. Does this apply to each station, or this is the whole system? I guess it's the whole system. All right, I'm not clear about that. Does anybody else want to weigh in on any of this stuff?
Well, the idea is our audited financial statements are done at the level of the 501c3, which is Pacifica. There is some breakout on the individual units. So the 5 stations are some of those accounting units. And so what I'm not clear about at the moment, but we will get clear about this before too terribly long, is what level do we submit the AFRs, which are not AFSs, though they're based on, the AFRs are based on information that's in the AFS. Do we submit it at the Pacifica level or do we submit it at the station level? And we'll just do whichever one is the right one.
All right. And Michael writes here, basic Pac-Man says we have 10 weeks. And Michael writes, yeah, go on, Julie.
No, I'm done. Did I have my hand up?
Yeah, you did, huh? Okay.
Sorry.
And then someone needs to create a new account to access the Integrated Station Information System to access the SAS radio survey. Okay, good point. So that has to be moved on ASAP.
Well, that comes with the system. I had to log in, and then each station had a login. There's a whole complex issue of who gets to do what. And I think Julie, the AFR is universal across Pacifica, but the SASs are all done individually by the stations.
Okay. All right.
I'm not sure of that. But we get the ISIS login when we make our application, and I'm not sure because we always had it. When I was quote appointed this super compliance officer thing, I had that then and doled out the logins to the various people.
All right. Dan, you have got some comments before you read this next thing?
Let's see. I had written something down. Well, we obviously have to answer the question, how much is reported as the foundation and how much is reported as the individual station. And get that answer is going to make a big difference on how it's reported, right?
Good question. I don't know. Michael.
Yeah, I put in the chat. It's kind of a catch-22. If we need the SAS to apply, and we can't access the ISIS until we've applied, which is where you get the instructions on how to fill out the SAS. Can somebody clarify that? Who's been through this previously when we actually were able to do it?
The SAS is a whole setup inside ISIS. There are a whole bunch of different elements to it, and it's basically laid out for you as you go through it on the web, so you can paste stuff in. But
I'm asking if we can't access ISIS until we've applied. Do you need the SAS in order to apply?
No. I mean, you apply and say we'd like to be part of this, and if they say yes, then you have to do all the other stuff. At least that's my understanding. I never had to apply, so I don't know. But it doesn't make any sense for you to do. I guess you could do an SAS without ISIS, but it's a very involved thing. It takes a lot of time. It's a big report, and I'm pretty sure that they would give you access to ISIS to enable you to do the SAS according to their parameters. But that's something we would find out, because the first step is to apply.
Yeah. All right. Well, is Stephanie Wells on this, the new ED on this call? But I guess she.
I don't think she is.
Okay, because she said she was going to join us, but I guess she's not. Okay. All right, Danny, this thing, section 16.
All right. Extent of CPB commitment. The CPB makes no commitment or representation expressed or implied, to provide grantee funds in excess of the CSG for which grantee qualifies and CPB determines is appropriate. CSG awards are contingent upon CPB receiving its federal appropriation. In the event reductions occur in the amount of the federal appropriation, which is allocated to CSG awards, whether by rescission or otherwise, and whether before or after funds are paid to grantee, the CSG awards shall be recalculated based on the revised appropriation and reduced accordingly, and grantee shall promptly refund the CPB any amount paid to in excess of the reduced award.
Any questions on that?
I notice they don't take into consideration whether that amount may go up.
Well, anybody have any comments on this? All right, this is precisely this section 16 is why we have to be involved on Capitol Hill with the Progressive Caucus of the House and the Senate, because this is where we can actually affect things for everybody. And we used to do it. Unfortunately, it was Pat Scott who was sent to Washington to do it in the early 90s, but this is an issue where we really have to sort of go in there and schmooze on Capitol Hill with these guys, because obviously if the House, you know, they always are defending the CPB funding. I don't have to tell you, everybody's familiar with the attacks on it all the time. I'm sure if the GOP takes the House and the Senate again, they're going to, go after the CPB. But here's where we have leverage, where we can go in and influence Congress people who are on the communications committees in the House to, hey, think about us, or think about these issues that have to do, because this means we're basically going to get screwed if they decide to cut money down. All right, anyway. Termination. CPB reserves the right to terminate you if you fail to comply with the general provisions or provide inaccurate information. Upon termination, the CPB may in its sole discretion require grantee requires CSG funds for fruit, blah, blah. Okay, that's what happened to us, by the way. Okay, Danny, section 18.
All right, return of funds, unused funds, all fiscal year 2022 CSG funds that are not expended by September 30th, 2023 must be returned to CPB on or before November 3rd, 2023. Unauthorized expenditures. Unauthorized CSG expenditures shall be repaid by grantee to CBP immediately upon CBP's request. Loss of CSG eligibility. When a grantee is no longer eligible to receive a CSG, CPB in its sole discretion may require grantees to return CSG funds as set forth below. In any of the situations described in paragraphs 2 or 4 below, CPB may require a recipient of a CSG to return the greater of all unexpended CSG funds from grant periods that have not yet expired, or the amount equal to the pro rata monthly share of the total CSG for all grant periods that have not yet expired, multiplied by the number of full months remaining in the grant period. In addition to the amount the CPB may require a CSG recipient to return under paragraph 1 above, if any recipient of a CSG effectuates a transfer of control, assignment, or a lease of its broadcast license to a non-CSG qualified organization, whether or not effectuated in accordance with section 19 assignment, CPB may require the recipient to return an amount not to exceed the greater of 20% of the sale price in the event of a sale, 20% of the amount to be paid under the lease over the course of its term in the event of a lease, or 20% of all CSG funds that have been provided as calculated on a pro rata monthly basis during the 24-month period preceding the effective date of the grantee's agreement for transfer of control, assignment, or release, or if any recipient of a CSG ceases to operate a qualified public radio service due to the relinquishment or loss of its broadcast license, CPB may require the recipient to return an amount not to exceed 15% of all CSG funds that have been provided as calculated on a pro rata monthly basis during the 24-month period preceding the date on which the relinquishment or revocation became final, i.e. no longer subject to administrative or judicial review. Provided, however, that if the relinquishment of a broadcast license is related to a merger or consolidation with another CSG qualified organization, then CPB's ability to require the return of funds shall be governed by paragraph 3 below rather than this paragraph. Or if CPB determines that any recipient of a CSG for any reason other than those set forth in paragraphs 1 and 2 above is no longer qualified to receive CSG funds, including but not limited to as a result of a failure to comply with any requirement of these general provisions or the imposition by the FCC of limits upon its operations, the CPB may require the recipient to return an amount not to exceed 15% of all CSG funds that have been provided as calculated on a pro rata monthly basis during the 24-month preceding the date on which CPB determines that the recipient was no longer qualified. Geez. If a grantee effectuates a transfer of control, assignment, or lease of its broadcast license to a non-CSG qualified organization that, as a result of the transfer of control, assignment, or lease desires to become a CSG qualified organization and is otherwise qualified, or relinquishes its broadcast license pursuant to a merger or consolidation with another CSG qualified organization and complies with the requirements of section 19 assignment, CPB may in its sole discretion permit the recipients to assign any of the funds that CPB might otherwise require the recipient to return pursuant to paragraph 1 above to the organization with which the recipient's operations were or are to be merged or consolidated, provided that the recipient demonstrate to CPB's satisfaction that such funds will be used in accordance with these general provisions. If any recipient of a CSG effectuates a transfer of control, assignment, or lease of its broadcast license to another CSG qualified organization and complies with the requirements of this section, CPB may, in its sole discretion, permit the recipient to assign any of the funds that CPB might otherwise require the recipient to return pursuant to paragraph 1 above to the CSG qualified transferee or lessee, provided that the recipient demonstrates to CPB's satisfaction that such funds will be used in accordance with these general provisions. Procedures for return of funds. In all cases in which funds must be returned, checks shall be made payable to the CPB and forwarded to Vice President and Controller, Corporation of Public Broadcasting, and there's the address. If guarantee fails to return funds due to CPB, CPB reserves the right to offset said amount due against grantee's future CSG payments.
All right. Any comments about this? Anybody have any comments about this? All right. I have two comments about this. One, those folks who are always talking about selling signals or creating PSOAs, it obviously is to their benefit not to have CPB funding, because then they wouldn't be covered by any of these restrictions here. None of this would apply to them. So that's sort of interesting. I mean, I hate to be conspiratorial. Anyway, Section 19 assignment. Grantee may not assign any of its right or obligations, blah, blah, blah. Third party becomes responsible for providing programming without okay, that's a no-brainer. All right, okay, Danny, non-discrimination.
I get all the long ones, don't I?
I'll do it. Okay, Section 20 non-discrimination. Grantee must comply with the non-discrimination provisions set forth below. Discrimination. Okay, that's an. I won't even read that. We all understand that. I think we all understand the next thing too. Grantee shall comply with all laws on discrimination, race, color, religion, age, sex, creed. And this sort of gets back into what Grace was saying earlier about the necessity to make sure that everybody takes those sexual harassment and diversity tests if they're necessary, because that does impregnate us from some problems. Anyway, we're close to the end. Equal Pay Act, again, these are all the laws, which who knows, these schmucks might try to, knock out, but anyway. Subcontracts. A grantee must include all the provisions of the section, all contracts and subcontracts funded by its CSG. Interesting. And let me read this one down and I'll throw it to you. Grantee must certify in its CSG agreement and certification of eligibility to CPB that it complies with the FCC rules concerning equal employment opportunity. Okay, because remember there's a big thing in the requirements to get money that has to do with maintaining those statistics. Okay, Danny, section 22.
All right, other non-discrimination requirements. Discrimination claims. Grantee acknowledges that the CPB is a private nonprofit corporation and does not have the legal authority to investigate or adjudicate complaints alleging discriminatory practices by grantee. CPB will therefore refer all such complaints it receives to a government agency with jurisdiction to conduct any proceedings that may be appropriate. Further, CPB will cooperate fully with every such agency with jurisdiction to inquire into alleged discriminatory practices by a grantee. Applicable laws and regulations. Grantee acknowledges that the laws and regulations prohibiting discrimination against persons on the basis of race, color, religion, national origin, age, sex, or physical or mental handicap may be federal, state, or local, and may vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Grantee represents and warrants that it knows, understands, and applies the laws and regulations regarding discrimination, and acknowledges that CPB is under no obligation to advise grantee of the same unless required by law or regulation. Suspension or cancellation of CSG. Whenever a court or government agency with jurisdiction shall make a determination that grantee is in violation of federal, state, or local laws and regulations prohibiting discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, age, national origin, sex, or physical or mental handicap, and notice of such determination is provided to CPB, the CPB shall promptly notify the grantee that unless grantee demonstrates to CPB's satisfaction within 30 days that the violation has been corrected or that grantee is in compliance with all provisions of such determination, CPB may suspend or cancel all CSG or other CPB funding. Whenever such determination is appealed or otherwise challenged in an appropriate forum, whether or not the effect of such determination is stayed pending appeal, CPB shall notify grantee that unless grantee can show cause to the contrary within 30 days, the CPB shall suspend or cancel CPB assistance. If CPB decides to suspend or cancel such funding, all sums that would have been payable to grantee shall be held by CPB pending completion of the appellate process, and CPB shall not suspend or cancel its non-financial or in-kind assistance during the appeal.
Any comments about that? Okay. Section 23, governing law and jurisdiction. Basically, this says that once the general provisions on all instruments between grantee and CPB related shall be construed in accordance with the laws of the District of Columbia. So by accepting a community service grant, the grantee submits and consents in advance to the jurisdiction of the Superior Court of the District of Columbia and the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia for all claims and disputes. In other words, we have to go to Washington to deal with them legally. I'll read section 24. CPB reserves the right in its sole discretion to amend the general provisions and will notify grantee of the same. Grantee will be deemed to agree and comply with the amendments unless it notifies CPB otherwise in writing within 30 days of receipt of CPB's notification. And upon receiving grantee's notification, the grantee will be disqualified from the CSG program, and grantee shall immediately repay CPB any amounts due the CPB under Section 18 return to funds. Let me see what this next thing is here. Okay, so these is just definitions, and let's see if there's any ones we're confused about. So this is all their acronyms. And annual financial summary report. I'm not going to, we can all see these things and study these. Average quarterly hour persons, AQH, the average number of persons listening to a station for at least 5 minutes during a 15-minute period.
Oh.
The average AQH, the average of the station's 2 prior years, reported by Nielsen in his spring survey period. Calculation document, CAP category. We went through that before. Those are the relations of the sizes of the metropolitan metro media audience to our particular radio station. Coverage area population, the population within a station's coverage areas based on contours specified by the CPB, and the most recent population data published by the U.S. Census Bureau. So in other words, that's all listed in the Nielsen's. New York is 15 to 16 million, etc. Let's see here. CPB qualified programming. General audience programming that demonstrates a station's demonstrated community needs of an educational, informed, and cultural nature. Programs are not considered CPB programming, include but aren't limited to political or religious philosophies. Programming designed primarily for in-school and professional and service audiences. Again, this is their acronyms. Let me just see how much this goes on. I think we're all familiar with the difference between a full-time employee and a full-time equivalent employee. Minority audience service station, MAS. Now, this is very important. This affects how we are able to, sometimes low audience, get in this category. A radio station that provides significant service to a minority group or groups through diverse programming that serves the needs and interests of minorities. Stations are deemed mass if they meet at least one of the following criterion. A measured minority audience composition, CUME, greater than 51% averaged over the previous 3 years. The station is licensed to a designated historical black college or university. The station is licensed to a Native American tribe, a consortium of Native American tribes, an entity controlled by a Native American tribe. So obviously the most important criterion here is this question of, do we serve 51%, is 51% of the audiences in each station a minority audience composition? I know that's true in New York. It's actually much higher than that these days.
Previous 3 quarters, by the way, not years.
By quarters, yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you for correcting me there, Mike. Michael. And rural audience service station. Okay, RAS, a station with a cap density equal. Well, again, here, this was raised earlier by Beth. That's an interesting question because we go into rural areas too with that big signal down in Los Angeles. Station activity survey, the survey that the CPB uses to collect information on station operations to enable the CPB to advocate the interests of public broadcasting, assist stations and other public broadcasting organizations with planning and evaluation to anticipate industry trends and calculate station CSG payments and non-federal financial support. The total cash and the fair market value of property and services grantee receives from sources other than the United States or any agency or instrumentality of the United States or any other public broadcasting entity as further defined in 47 U.S. Code. All right. And then I will not go through these. These are examples of unrestricted CSG expenditure, which we can perhaps do another time. These are examples of creating, how you would determine how we're calculating. Again, we could do that another time. But anyway, let me stop the share. Let me also see if I have this this document that we found here that was raised in the PNB meetings. But anyway, does anybody want to say something about this? Any comments?
I was wondering about the discrimination charges. If let's say something happens in California, I think we've started adding um, sexual identity to the list of things that you shouldn't discriminate against. And if that's a state law here and it's not in anywhere else within the foundation system, does that go against us, or, you know, or are we just relegated to the ones that are listed as federal recognized discriminatory laws?
Anybody have a comment on that? I don't know the answer to that. Yeah, go on, Julie.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the idea is there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to go above and beyond in terms of our anti-discrimination policy. You know, we just have to make sure that we hit everything that's in the federal list that CPB shares with us.
Thank you.
All right. Any other comments about all this stuff? I can see you're all brimming with energy here. Any comments about it? All right. Well, I can see implementation is going to be a arduous task. And I'm curious how, yeah, Bruce. Bruce, go on. A lot of fun. All right. Any comments about that? Comment?
If I might, Jim.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, so I mean, that's a good point. You know, I think one of our issues has been, you know, because of our financial situation, we're, you know, stretched thin, we have few staff, right? And so so that was a good suggestion. I think the other thing is to recognize is that since 2018, we have used NETA, National Educational Telecommunications Association, as our accountants for at the foundation level, and they provide accounting services to a bunch of the stations as well. And so I think, not all of them, right? But I think that will, you know, because NETA has a lot of experience with other clients that they have who get CPB money, you know, that they can probably really help us, you know, kind of like, you know, keep on the straight and narrow in terms of the accounting. Now, that means that, you know, GMs and station accounting and business staff have to cooperate, you know, but I think as long as there's good communication, we should be okay there. You know, I mean, there's a lot to be on top of, but you know, we're not going to be able, you're absolutely right. We're not going to be able to expect that GMs, where they're at a station where they are one of half a dozen employees, that they have a lot of time to sit and carefully read all these requirements. And that's where, maybe the important thing to do is to make sure that we've got somebody in the national office at Pacifica who's going to take responsibility for some of these things. And then, also works with all the stations across the foundation to make sure that, everybody's doing what they need to do to comply. I hope that helps. There might have been more to your question, but I don't remember it at this point.
Yeah,
All right.
there was a period when we did that. But it was sort of catch as catch can, because neither one of us, John and I did it, and mostly John was doing it. But there's so many other things that we have to do. Again, it's this, and the question becomes, is cost performance, is it worth it to get somebody?
All right. Any other comments about this? Well, all right. Any other comments about this before I open my mouth? Anybody? All right. Look, this has been a issue that has been pissing me off royally for 10 years, and it's something that I really don't have any. I don't accept any excuses about this at this point in time. I'm just talking how I personally, truly feel about this. I mean, I don't want to hear any bullshit from general managers that they're lazy and they got people. I mean, in New York, I know that Bertold only has himself. So I would be, and Bertold knows I would come and help him out on this. And I would ask other people to come and help me out on this, help him out on this. KPFA has a paid staff out there. They have people who've done this before. I'm sure the business manager there has done it before. KPFK is a problem. That means that a lot of people are going to help get this process underway. KPFT is a problem, given the situation there, but there's enough competent people there, I think they can probably help the general manager there. And PFW at least has, there are people there who, I don't think there's been enough layoffs in Washington. You guys can correct me in Washington. There must be people who are still there. Ron was around. Ron Pinchback was around when you were receiving this kind of money. So, I just think it's like, I'm thinking about when I used to play football. I used to be back there in the backfield. That damn ball's coming in my direction. I pick that son of a bitch up and then run with it. That's my attitude. And, we just have to try. We may not get it. Pac-Man, whoever the hell that is, you may be right. You may be right. I'm not, I'm cynical about a lot of this stuff too, but I say let's try it. Let's try to do it. And Pac-Man did correct me. Mr. Maclay equivocally assured a recent PNB in the presence of Ed Brazon that PAC Foundation Pacifica is compliant. Well, yeah. I agree that it's not as difficult. I just think I think we can actually get this done. We just have to really move on it. And people are paid money in this foundation. I just think, the hell with it. Let's see what happens. If we get rejected this time, fine. We'll be able to get better prepared next time. And nothing ventured, nothing gained as far as I'm concerned. And so rather than, I don't want to have meetings about this, have another meeting, that drives me nuts. And I'm not volunteering to lead the charge. Let's put it that way. This has to be a collective charge. But I think that, I'm glad that Julie's here. I think the board can, sort of, whip ass a little bit at the top level and say, okay, guys, we got to get this done. Come on. So that's my plea for, I don't want to sit there and, be negative about it. Sure, there's a lot of negativity, but, we already know that. So let's move on beyond that. But yeah, Bruce, I agree with you 100%. Don't worry, I'm not completely la-di-da about this. We just have to sit there and try to... And I'm glad that KPFA and PFW would probably get the initial money. Good. Great. Probably some of the people at KPFA would think, oh, that's a sneaky way for BAI to, take money from us or something like that. But, bullshit. We're just trying to benefit everybody. So anyway, that's my opinion about this. But where we go from here now, we went through a pretty lengthy process today, which I'm sure was stimulating as all hell. And yeah, go on, Mike.
Yeah, I was wondering if Beth might want to comment. She's on the phone. I don't know if she can raise her hand or not. But on previous discussions at the PNB Development Task Force and the KPFK fundraising committee, we've talked about the question of monetizing in some way or indicating the value, in any case, of the enormous number of volunteer hours that we get at all of our stations in some way. I'm wondering if there's been any thought to how that might apply towards the financial support criteria for the stations. It's not monetary, but it is, a very, very substantial value contribution in terms of the donated time of producers, programmers, other volunteers. And I think it might behoove us to try to figure out some way to get some kind of authorization from the CPP to count that.
Does anybody have any opinions about that?
This is Beth. I can
Go on,
say
Beth.
more. Yes, the IRS values nonprofit volunteer hours variously at each of the different states. In California right now, it's right around $30 an hour. On the East Coast, it's more than that. Given that it's an IRS figure that legitimizes this, there are ways to leverage that. We would need a system to account for those hours and the value of those hours and the documentation to back it up. But other nonprofits do this routinely. I've got a couple papers on it. I can send if anybody's interested. Michael, I think this is exactly the kind of place where we could use that. I'm glad you spotted that. It hadn't come to mind yet, although.
Yeah, if you can forward those documents, I'd like to see them.
Sure.
Sue, do you have Sue? Do you want to have a comment about this? You made a comment in the chat about this, Sue Cohen Johnson. Do you want to unmute? Sue? Well, I see Sue. Yeah, Sue, if you want to unmute. Well, so what Sue put in there was that volunteers used to sign their hours. I mean, I used to have to fill, when I was in the early 90s doing radio, I used to actually have to fill out a sheet that listed the hours that I put in to create a show as part of the CPB money. I don't know if they require that anymore, but that's a very good point. Then Nancy writes, each station must access their programming and swap reports to learn what needs to be done and to learn from each other. Yeah, I agree. Like, this is one of the reasons why, I don't know what you mean by the swap reports, but what do you mean, Nancy? You want to unmute, Nancy?
To share what they're doing, what their programming is at each station.
Right. Yeah, look, yeah, I'm totally in favor of that. I mean, we got to, at the national level, we have to, get all this information, the Nielsen's, the money, all that has to be common knowledge with the people on the PNB, because you cannot make any kind of determinations about what's going on here without actually seeing the actual data. And that includes the Nielsen rate. I personally think you need to see the Nielsen ratings going pretty far back, and plus the dailies coming in for actual money raised. I mean, I have that information in New York. Last time I shared that was with some people who decided to shut us down, so I'm not inclined to go run around broadcast that information again. Yeah, Bruce. Bruce, you got your hand up? Right. Well, in any event, so in terms of that, yeah, go on.
Just very briefly, all our time as governance, all the time we volunteer on committees and boards and task forces, that should all count too. It's significant. Thanks.
Hell yeah. All right. So in terms of action items coming out of this, okay, so all of us have had, 3 hours here reading. As you know, thank God tomorrow I'm going to read King Lear. That'll be more fun than this stuff. But we've all been reading this, and so the question is, how do we make it actionable? What we're doing today, what can come out of this, in terms of actually implementation, etc. What are we going to recommend? That these guys get their ass in gear? I mean, what are we going to do here? Don't bowl me over with your comments here.
This is Beth again.
Go on, Beth.
About all I'm in a position to do, well, I guess at two different levels. I've been convening the local KPFK cab work group to get a cab stood back up there again. And we're on the verge of an official, identifying members and launching those meetings. And at the national level, then the National Development Task Force will be tracking CPB involvement. At each, we track potential revenue streams, and this will be one of them. Dan has agreed to work with me on that. I set out looking for someone who knew more about it than I did, and I found him. So I'm hoping that, I don't know what else will be going on elsewhere, but at least at that level, those are our plans. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else have any ideas here? Yeah, Bruce, you raised your hand again, or you forgot to take it down? Well, that's a good idea. Why don't you do that? Well, okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, that's a good idea. Mike?
Yeah, I queried John Almella and the new ED during this call about the question of the KPFK FCC renewal, and Stephanie Wells emailed back to me and John, saying she'd seen this question earlier and was wondering where things stood and what she could do to facilitate it if it's not done. So, I think we do need to be in contact with, the national office and national management, about all these issues, particularly some of these deadlines that were coming up for, training or applications for the CPB.
Yeah, Stephanie had said she was going to attend, so I was. I don't mind doing this again, by the way. Although I don't know if Dan wants to do the reading, but I have no problem doing this again with others because the more the merrier. Anyway, yeah, we got to make sure that she knows we got 10 weeks to do this. Anyway, Franklin.
I agree with the Google document idea, and maybe each of us at our station could add in the criteria as we find out that we are in or out on it, whether we're meeting some of the certain ones that we talked about today that we think we're in danger of, the cab being the one I feel most important about it. KPFA, along with the budget or the audits. I know KPFA sometimes holds things up. So I agree with the document. That would help me if we could share that document. And then KPFA had hired a, I forgot the terminology for the fundraiser guy.
Development person?
Yes, we have a development director. And he hasn't got back to me on the email I sent, but he does seem active at local station board meetings every once in a while, or gives reports or is part of them. So I think we should, I copied the links and opened the links. I want to share it with him and have him help. That, I guess that's probably his job, and making sure that we're in compliance with the stuff at KPFA, since he has the ear of the manager.
All right.
So if we have developed that document, I'll be able to, I took some notes until I had to start getting ready to go. I got to be somewhere at 1. It's
Yeah,
1
no,
minute,
don't worry, man. Boogie.
1 minute to 1. But I think that Google document will help me certainly go through, and I'll be able to go to my development director, my manager, my local station board, and check off these things, and make sure that I'm helping to get us in compliance as a member of this committee here.
All right. I'm perfectly willing, by the way, to I have professional commitments in the next few weeks that has nothing to do with Pacifica. So, but I'm perfectly willing to have another meeting, perhaps on a Sunday in about 2 weeks, to see where we're at with all this stuff. And sort of get the, keep the ball rolling here. And let's see, I'm seeing some of the chat here. Pac-Man, well, yeah, Maxie Jackson. Now, when Maxie was in, and Michael knows this, because I believe Michael was on the programming committee with me at the national level, Maxie had actually met with the CPB when he became ED. And their comment, which was sort of amusing to listen to, was, and Grace is on the phone now, I know. He basically said, or Grace is not on the phone. He's told us that they had complained about our over-governance, which I must admit I had a good laugh at. And so the thing is that the ED, someone has to approach the CPB, who has the authority to sort of, tactfully, and Otis can chime in this, they have to sort of be like, Metternich and, someone else combined. They have to be like a multi-personed individual to sort of, okay, guys, we want to get back in, and, have to be very savvy about this, too. So, I mean, Otis, what's your opinion about that? Because
my opinion is nobody talks to the CPB except a lawyer, but Dan may have something to say about that because he has much more extensive connection with the CPB than I do. But the basic thing is, no, you don't call the CPB. That's Melody's job, or whoever we have.
Right. Dan, you want to add something here? I mean, Dan, actually, why don't we now let's spill the beans about your personal friend, Dan.
Okay. When I was first on the KCET cab back in the 90s, as chair of that cab, I was invited to board retreats with the corporate board. And the corporate board had someone on it by the name of Bruce Raymer. Bruce Raymer is Steven Spielberg's lawyer. And I was looking through the board of directors for the CPB last night. And sure enough, the chairman of the board is Bruce Raymer.
The chairman of the CPB board?
Yes.
Hilarious. Well, that has to, I guess the proper approach has to be court. I mean, it's like, like if Dan called him up out of the blue, I mean, Otis, chime in on this, man. I mean, it's not like, I do agree with you, lawyers, EDs, etc. But, obviously the personal touch is important. But Otis, what's your opinion about that? I think court, it's sort of what Sun Tzu says. You approach an objective with many fingers out to take it. So, but I'm just wondering what you think, Otis.
Oh, it's just really tough. I am a believer in the one-person contact rule, so that you don't have 25 people or even 3 calling up the same guy from this organization, each of whom is, got a different story. I think it drives them nuts. So I think it has to be coordinated. I wouldn't be relying on a personal connection, only because all the stuff that we just spent 3 hours on listening, it's all the rules, and They have to go by the rules. the guy can, the guy at the CPB who is our personal connection would love to give us the money, but he can't do it if we haven't done the things that he can use to show that we deserve the money. So, I don't think there's a lot of handling that's useful for this. I think the most we could do is show that we really want to do it right, and so that we make their job easy.
Right.
And
Well-
that's not calling up every 5 minutes or having 5 people call them.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
stuff like that. I don't know. I mean, I'd have to go with Dan has far more experience with this than I do. What I just said is what I know is a general rule for dealing with other entities.
Go on, Dan.
The way I see it is predisposing him to say, yes, let's enact the waiver in this case, because I know that they're really trying to get their shit together.
We get the waiver because we were careful and we worked hard to do what they needed, not because we're beer buddies.
Exactly.
Both.
But the rest of it,
Yeah, no.
because there's no personal connection, we'll probably just go by the rules very bureaucratically and very without having any kind of influence, friendly or otherwise.
But I have nothing wrong with a personal connection, but it has to be generated from something substantive, not just, we're both Democrats.
Yeah, no, I agree. A schmooze routine is useful, but it has to be tactically appropriate.
Exactly.
Because I can certainly think of many examples, and I won't. I mean, I can give ad nauseum give you examples of how that's worked. And here, Pac-Man, is that you, John? Anyway, Pacifica Foundation was fortunate that CBT decided to levy neither a fine or interest for the $137,000 it owed. Okay, that's when I think when we had to pay them back that money. So anyway, yeah, what I guess we're sort of left right. Jim D, this is an arduous task, right? And then somebody earlier posted that letter that that Donald cited, and I'm trying to see where the hell I thought I downloaded it. But yes, we must be compliant with open meetings requirements. Absolutely. Right. Open meeting requirements are essential. And I should add something about the open meeting requirements. Otis, I know, disagrees with me on this. I'll get to you in a second, Bruce. When the IG came into New York, and I don't know if they still do this, the IG told me that I was brought in by Bertold. He said, Jim, come on. I was at that point in charge of the Community Advisory Board. And this is, 2012. And he said, well, how often are you playing the open meetings requirements of the CPB? I said, what? So he said, they used to require that every quarter, I think, Otis can correct me on this, that you had to play for 3 days successively the open meeting requirements of the CPB on air. Now, I didn't know that. And then he said, well, how often are you, and he quoted our bylaws, because our bylaws have that we have to play announcements for our governance meetings, 3 times a day? Or something like that? For a certain consecutive, yeah, Julie, what are you about ready to chime in there?
Yeah. So I think when we read this part, it was way early in the document today.
Right.
There were a whole bunch of clauses, and it said A, B, C, D, or E. They were probably numbered, not lettered, but you get the point. The connector was or, which meant that we didn't have to do each and every one of those things. And so one of them was the web posting. So the KPFTX.org takes care of the web posting. There are other options. We could do, on-air PSAs about the meeting times. And there were some other things. Oh, it was posted in the, announcement section of a newspaper. Like anybody ever reads those. But so we don't have to do them all. Now, maybe once upon a time we had to do them all, but we don't now.
All right. Well, anyway, I just recall what happened. I think Otis, you're unmuted yet. We can't hear your comments there. All right, you just raised your hands in disgust or in accord. I'm not sure. In any event, I just want to relay that because that was sort of stuck in my mind, and then I wrote a script to create an open meetings requirement card. And then I believe that was shortly after that John and Otis had arrived at this KPTFX solution. So then it did not become necessary. And I believe he mentioned to me that the chief engineers in New York have been complying with that. So again, I have no idea what's going on throughout the whole network. Yeah, Bruce, go on. Yeah, I called Melanie up, and she, Kriegler and I went to the same school together, so I could get away with him not charging me $300 an hour. And Kriegler, Melanie basically said the same thing. Well, I'll just be sort of short and abrupt because I won't charge you, but basically, you guys have to have your shit together. Along the lines of what Otis was saying, we have to really show that we're, actively from the grassroots trying to get this problem solved, and then come to me. And as I understand it, somebody mentioned that Melanie was owed about a certain amount of dollars. I don't know if she's been paid, and then somebody then got another entertainment lawyer. Julie, do you know anything about that?
I don't know all the details, but I know we're working on whatever.
All right, whatever. So yeah, but so in other words, the ED, who I assume Stephanie doesn't really know much about this kind of stuff, she has to be briefed about it, and she has to work with an attorney, and we got to show that we're trying to get the shit together at all the different stations simultaneously, and then the phone call to Dan's friend down the road, that's when strategically it would be good. Like these guys are really trying to get their shit together, something like that, Dan, right?
Right.
Yeah. All right. So, I just want to tell you something that I've been trying to arrange that's on a less tense and conflicting subject. There is a person who is working with the most listened to podcast in the United States, the Daily at the New York Times. She teaches in the journalism school at Columbia University. And we've been negotiating back and forth for a couple of weeks, and actually now 2 months, to have her come on and talk about podcast production in general. And the Times doesn't want to be associated with Pacifica, so it's sort of been, I said, look, what we'll do is we'll do a private thing. So don't be surprised that if I let people know when she responds to me, if she does, because she had to ask permission from the Daily to come and do a private thing, which unfortunately we can't record because I wanted to do it for training purposes. But that's coming up. I want that person to sort of share her opinion. She's really a brilliant audio producer, and it sort of reminds me of the good old days when I was having lots of fun producing oral documentaries, that whole thing of aesthetics of oral art. And then what I'll do is, at least we've percolated a lot. A lot of people are here today. So what I'll do is I'll schedule something in the next 2 weeks, and we'll sort of circle back and see where the hell we're at. But remember, time's ticking. That's 8 weeks now left to do this shit. So I don't want to sort of have these, I don't want to engage in endless verbal masturbation. I want to get things done. So let's figure out how to actually do that as we progress. Any other comments for today? Otis, you got any closing comments? We can hear your wisdom. We're not hearing your wisdom, Otis. Come on, man. You got to unmute. Oh, you're on strike. Okay. All right, Dan, you got any closing comments?
No, this has been very interesting. And if you wanted to show this to other people, I don't think you recorded it. So I guess that's
Oh, we didn't record it? I thought we were recording it. Otis was streaming it, right?
Oh, that's right. So you've got a copy, Otis?
Yeah. Otis, do you have a copy of this? He's on the phone there. He's getting ready for church tomorrow.
Oh,
Otis. All right, he's too busy right now talking. You know,
okay.
endless Machiavellian machinations of Pacifica Radio. Okay. All right. Anyway, you guys have a good night, and we'll get back to this in 2 weeks. I'll schedule something that's accessible, and we can circle back on this and see where we're at. I'm like a dog on a bone on this one.
Excellent.
Otis, you got any closing? Otis, have you been streaming this, man? Oh, I can't see his ass. Okay, the hell with it. All right, you guys take it easy. Good night.
Thanks very much.
Bon appetit.
Good night, all.